Chapter 1233. Compared to Qingying, Cheng Yaojia's heart was in a mess. There was a man hiding in her bed. If her cousin found out, how could she live with herself in the future? Didn't I say that I was afraid of infecting you with a cold and indirectly harming Wushuang? At this critical moment, Cheng Yaojia didn't have any good countermeasures and could only use the previous reason. Tianxiang novel, Tu Cheng Ying shook her head and said, "At worst, I'll let someone else take care of Wushuang. Right now, I don't want to think about anything else. I just want to quietly hug my cousin." Seeing that she was getting closer and closer, Cheng Yaojia hurriedly used her hands and feet to push Song Qingshu to the other side. Then she turned her body sideways, tried to use the quilt and her body to block Cheng Ying's view. Fortunately, Cheng Ying was in a daze and didn't notice her abnormality. Seeing that she was half lying and half sitting on the bed and only wearing her underwear, she couldn't help but tease her. "Cousin, brother-in-law has gone to linen, yet you are still dressed so seductively. Aren't you afraid of attracting a flower thief?" Although their relationship couldn't be compared to Lu Wushuang's, they were cousins. When they were young, Cheng Yaojia and Cheng Yaojia's relationship could be said to be the best in the entire 6 prefectures, except for Lu Wushuang. Therefore, this kind of joke was not rude at all. Cheng Yaojia's face turned red. She thought that there was a real flower thief behind her. Not only did he steal flowers, but he also stole hearts. "I haven't slept with my cousin for a long time. I miss the days when I was a child." Cheng Ying's face showed a nostalgic expression. Then she began to untie her belt. Seeing that she was about to take off her clothes, Cheng Yaojia's eyes suddenly went wide. No, what a joke. There was a man in the quilt. Her cousin was a virgin. How could she let her innocence be tarnished? "What do you mean, no?" Cheng Ying put her hand on her belt and was stunned. You don't need to take off your clothes. Just leave it like this," Cheng Yaojia said with some panic. Actually, she wanted to drive her out, but things had already come to this point. She knew that Cheng Ying had already made up her mind. She could only let Cheng Ying put on her clothes and go to bed first. After Cheng Ying fell asleep, she would let Song Qingshu quietly leave. "Cousin, you have taken off your clothes. If I don't take them off, won't I dirty your bed? What's more, I'll bump into you if I sleep with my clothes on, and it'll be uncomfortable for me to sleep alone." Cheng Ying smiled and loosened her belt. She took off her dress and placed it on a stool. Then, she crawled into bed. Cheng Yaojia was shocked and hurriedly moved back. She used her body to separate Cheng Yaojia from the man behind her. Seeing Cheng Ying take off her clothes, she opened her mouth, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Could she tell her that there was a man here? Fortunately, although Cheng Ying had taken off her dress, her underwear was more conservative. Not an inch of her skin was exposed, so there was no fear of her suffering. Cheng Ying crawled into bed and lay down. Suddenly, she wrinkled her nose and asked in confusion, "Cousin, did you drink?" Cheng Yaojia was startled. Song Qingshu's body reeked of alcohol. Even if she wanted to hide the smell, she wouldn't be able to. Cheng Ying had a faint smile on her face. "No wonder my cousin has been trying to stop me from coming over. It turns out that you're doing bad things here." Cheng Yaojia's face turned pale. She only had one thought in her mind. It's over, it's over. She knows everything. Even Song Qingshu frowned. He slowly stretched out his finger, planning to seal Cheng Ying's acupoints as soon as something went wrong. Fortunately, Cheng Ying immediately said, "Cousin, I know that you've always followed the rules and are a well-known young lady from a noble family. You don't want people to know that you drink. But drinking late at night is the most harmful to your body. Cousin, don't drink anymore." Cheng Yaojia's heart was about to jump out of her throat, but when she heard what she said, she calmed down and took the opportunity to reply. Okay. Cousin promises you that I won't drink at night anymore." Cheng Ying stretched out her hand and touched her forehead. She sighed and said, "Cousin, your body is so hot that I can't leave. Tonight, I'll take care of you. I don't want you to alarm the maidservants downstairs. The maidservants are very talkative. I'm afraid that within a day, everyone in the 6 prefectures will know." "Thank you." Cheng Yaojia's face and ears turned red. She thought that her body was burning hot not because of the wine, but because of the man behind her. But it was not convenient to explain the details to her. Chang-Ying calmly stared at her with her starry eyes and softly said, "Cousin, what's on your mind that you need to drink alone to drown your sorrows?" Cheng Yaojia secretly groaned. How could she find a reasonable reason in such a short time? Seeing that she didn't speak, Cheng Ying continued to ask, "Is it because of what the old madam said during the day?" Cheng Yaojia was startled. She remembered that the old madam had called her a chicken that didn't lay eggs during the day. Her face suddenly turned ugly. No matter how good her temper was, she couldn't stand such an insult. Noticing her expression, Cheng-Ying understood what was going on. She had no choice but to comfort her. The old madam is old. She hopes that her daughter-in-law and granddaughter-in-law will help her spread the family's branches. This is very normal. But her words were a bit excessive. "Cousin, please don't take it to heart." Cheng Yaojia gently nodded, but her heart was filled with grievance. Cheng-Ying patted her shoulder and comforted her. "Cousin, I see that your complexion is rosy and your pulse is steady. Your body should be very healthy. You don't look like you will have no descendants. Could it be that the problem lies with brother-in-law?" Cheng Yaojia blushed and whispered, "Don't talk nonsense. After all, she and Lu Guanyin have been husband and wife for many years." Although he was now impotent, she didn't want this secret to be known by outsiders. She didn't want her husband's reputation to be damaged. Cheng-Ying didn't guess what she was thinking. She only wanted to comfort her cousin. "It was fine before, but this time when I came back and saw brother-in-law, he seemed to lack energy. I'll open a house for you tomorrow. When the time comes, you can buy some medicine and add it to brother-in-law's diet to help him replenish his qi and blood." Song Qing-shu couldn't help laughing. He admired Cheng-Ying a bit. She was worthy of being the last disciple of Peach Blossom Island. Just by looking at him during the day, she was able to determine that there was something wrong with Lu Guanying's body. However, she wasn't an immortal who could predict the future. How could she know what was wrong with Lu Guanying's body? Even if she relied on her prescription for a lifetime, it wouldn't be enough. All right, let's not talk about your brother-in-law. You are a virgin girl. Aren't you ashamed to talk about this?" Cheng Yaojia felt that it was strange to talk about her husband in this kind of situation, so she quickly changed the topic. "I'm just worried about you," Cheng-Ying said coquettishly. Song Qing-shu was dumbfounded. He never expected that Cheng-Ying, who was always calm and collected, would have such a cute side. Her coquettish voice made half of his body go limp. Smelling the delicate fragrance of the two women in the quilt, he couldn't help but feel his heart sway. After the initial nervousness, he became bolder. In the dark, he felt around Cheng Yaojia's body. He found the right angle and slowly moved closer. "Cousin, are you?" Cheng Yaojia was just about to change the topic to Cheng-Ying when she suddenly felt a strange sensation in her body. She couldn't help but feel a bit angry. This enemy's courage was just too big. Today, I saw a reader's long review in the book review section. It was as rare as a panda. I haven't seen many long reviews in the past 3 years. Chapter 1234. When Cheng-Ying heard her stop, she couldn't help but look at her curiously. She saw that her cousin's face was changing and her skin was as red as a honey peach. "Cousin, are you not feeling well?" Cheng-Ying couldn't help but ask when she heard her deliberately lowered breathing. "No, nothing." Cheng Yaojia gritted her teeth and endured. In order to divert the other party's attention, she had to continue asking, "Why did you ask that question just now? Did something happen?" "No, nothing." This time, it was Cheng-Ying's turn to be vague and hesitant. "Quick, tell me quickly. What's there to be embarrassed about with your cousin?" Cheng Yaojia frowned slightly. She could feel that her voice was trembling. She didn't know how long she could keep it a secret. Unable to withstand her coaxing and pestering, Cheng-Ying finally began to reveal her thoughts. "Actually, something happened today. In the afternoon, when Prince Song was treating Wu Shuang's injury, Cheng-Ying blushed and finally told her the whole story. In fact, she didn't want to tell anyone about it, but it was really uncomfortable to keep it in her heart. At the same time, she felt very wronged. She wanted to talk to her gentle and kind cousin. She trusted her cousin's character and knew that she would never reveal her secret. "What? You used your mouth to help him?" Cheng Yaojia was shocked. She had imagined countless situations, but she didn't expect that it was related to Song Qing-shu. The man behind her was really something. As long as it was a beautiful woman, he would always be involved. Cheng Yaojia felt the change in the man in her body. Obviously, he had heard everything clearly. She bit her lip and quietly pinched the man behind her. Hearing her cousin's words, Cheng Ying suddenly became anxious. No, I didn't mean it. At that time, I thought it was a hidden weapon or something. I didn't know it was his. Hearing her cousin's crying voice, Cheng Yaojia naturally didn't dare to joke anymore. She slowly comforted her. Don't worry. It's not a big deal. Anyway, I don't think Prince Song is that kind of big mouth. He won't tell anyone. But Cheng Ying didn't feel relieved. Instead, she said, I know he won't say anything, but I'm afraid he'll think I did it on purpose and think I'm a shameless woman who's trying to seduce him. Cheng Yaojia's cheeks turned hot when she heard this. She thought that even if he was shameless and lowly, she had already lost count of how many times she had been shameless and lowly. Don't worry, cousin. With your orchid-like temperament, no man will think of you that way. Moreover, if you really want to take it seriously, I think that Song guy is probably taking advantage of you on purpose. She had purposely said the last sentence for the man behind her to hear. Based on her understanding of Song Qing-shu, the more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was true. Wanting to seek justice for her cousin, Cheng Yaojia bit her lip and secretly drew back her legs. She fiercely squeezed Song Qing-shu, causing him to suck in a breath of cold air. It was both painful and happy. There were all kinds of feelings that couldn't be described to outsiders. No, cousin, you don't know the situation at that time. In fact, Prince Song didn't have a choice at that time. He was at a critical moment of healing Wu Shuang's injury. For some reason, Cheng Ying defended Song Qing-shu. Speaking of which, I quite admire him. If it weren't for his strong will, Wu Shuang's leg would have been in danger. Song Qing-shu's heart was filled with emotion. Cheng Ying was really as good and considerate as described in the original work. She was always considerate of others. This kind of temperament really made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Even if they couldn't be lovers, they could still be friends. Cheng Yaojia's heart was moved. She couldn't help but ask, do you like him? Cheng Ying suddenly looked like a frightened rabbit. Of course not. Cousin, why would you think that? Cheng Yaojia pursed her lips and smiled. I almost forgot that our Miss Cheng's heart already belongs to someone. Hearing this, Song Qing-shu suddenly pricked up his ears. Cheng Ying was embarrassed and anxious. She turned around and didn't dare to look at her. She said with a whimper, How can my heart belong to someone else? Seeing her turn around, Cheng Yaojia let out a long sigh of relief. She signaled Song Qing-shu behind her to find an opportunity to leave while she wasn't looking. She continued to tease her, saying, Since I see a gentleman, I don't like him. For example, that Yang Dage, Lu Dage, it must be that girl Wu Shuang's big mouth. She must be talking nonsense everywhere. Cheng Ying felt that her cheeks were very hot. She didn't need to look in the mirror to know that they must be very red. Cheng Yaojia moved closer and hugged her from behind. On one hand, she wanted to escape from the claws of the man behind her. On the other hand, she wanted to make sure that Cheng Ying couldn't suddenly turn around so that she wouldn't see Song Qing-shu. She waved her small hand behind her, indicating that Song Qing-shu should leave quickly. Cheng Yaojia then said, You misunderstood Wu Shuang. One day, she came over with a piece of paper and asked me what the words on it meant. I saw these words written on the paper and thought that with Wu Shuang's accomplishment, she couldn't write them. When I asked her, she said that she saw you writing these words on the paper. You wrote them and tore them, and wrote them again. She was worried that you had something on your mind, so she stole a piece of paper. Unfortunately, she couldn't understand it, so she came to ask me. As soon as I saw it, I knew that my little sister was in love. She asked Wu Shuang who you met during this period. She said that she met a young man called Yang Gua. Then I naturally guessed what you were thinking. Cheng Ying was extremely embarrassed, but she hurriedly said, Cousin, you can't tell Wu Shuang about this. Cheng Yaojia was startled. Why? Cheng Ying faintly sighed. Wu Shuang is deeply in love with Yang Dage. How can I get involved? This time, even Song Qing-shu couldn't help but sigh. Cheng Ying's considerate nature was simply distressing. In the original work, she had never spoken about her feelings for Yonghua, nor had she told anyone about it. He couldn't help but admire Master Jin's skill. How could a young girl's first awakening of love be able to say it out loud? She just wrote it over and over again and then burned it. If Yonghua hadn't stealthily stolen a piece of paper and read the contents, who would know what she was thinking? No wonder when Yonghua read the original work, his heart was pounding and he couldn't help but become infatuated. Not to mention him. Even the readers were infatuated. Cheng Yaojia's heart was pierced by her words. She couldn't help but sigh. Silly girl, you can't just let go of your feelings. If you don't bravely fight for it, I'm afraid you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Cheng Ying bitterly smiled. No need. Yang Deage has another person in his heart. Whether it's Wu Shuang or me, we are destined to have no ending. My poor little sister. Cheng Yaojia's heart ached when she heard this. She couldn't help but hold her in her arms. This made Cheng Ying somewhat uncomfortable. Cousin, I've already thought it through. She suddenly cried out in alarm and turned around in a flash. She stared dumbfoundedly at Cheng Yaojia's back. Cheng Yaojia secretly cursed. She wanted to hold her and not let her turn around, but the other party was the last disciple of Peach Blossom Island. Her martial arts were far superior to hers. If she really turned around, how could she hold her? You, why are you here? Cheng Ying sat up straight. She had already seen everything on the bed. She pointed at Song Qingshu in horror. Chapter 1235. It turned out that Cheng Ying felt uncomfortable being hugged by Cheng Yaojia. She wanted to pat Cheng Yaojia's body to show that she had already thought it through and was not as sad as she had imagined. Who would have thought that what she touched was not her cousin's soft body, but a hairy thigh? She was scared out of her wits. Her first thought was that her brother-in-law had not left and was still on the bed. When Cheng Ying thought about how her conversation with her cousin had been overheard, coupled with the fact that she was sharing the same bed with her brother-in-law, she felt ashamed and resentful. However, she soon discovered that the truth was even more shocking than she had imagined. Unlike Cheng Yaojia, whose whole body was limp and frightened, Song Qingshu did not panic at all. He smiled and said, "Why can't I be here?" These years, Song Qingshu had experienced countless storms and waves. Now his heart was firm. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, he would not blink, let alone this small situation. Yiyushi, after the initial shock, Cheng Ying's face quickly sank. She said coldly, "I never thought that the great hero of the world was actually a lowly thief who bullied someone else's wife." Song Qingshu gloomily said, "You are wrongly accused. When did I bully her?" When Cheng Ying heard Cheng Yaojia's irregular breathing and deliberately suppressing her desire, she did not realize anything. Now that she thought about it, how could she not know what he had just done to her cousin? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She grabbed the jade flute that had just been placed on the bedside and thrust it forward. Her first move was old heretic Huang's jade flute swordplay. Huang Yaoshi's martial arts skill was 30% evil. In addition to her sudden attack, coupled with her anger, her sword could be said to be cunning and ruthless. Even if her opponent's martial arts skill was higher than hers, it was very likely that he would be defeated by her attack. Huang Yaoshi's martial arts skill was 30% evil. Unfortunately, Song Qingshu's martial arts had reached the pinnacle of perfection. It could be said that he could do whatever he wanted. Seeing her sword thrust toward him, he moved his mind and sealed her acupoints. Cheng Ying was horrified. She knew that Song Qingshu's martial arts were very high, but she did not expect it to be this high. Seeing that she had no resistance, she could only coldly say, "Humph, your martial arts have reached the great master level, but your way of doing things does not have the bearing and strength of a great master." Song Qingshu was speechless. "Hey, little girl, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Have you ever thought that the truth isn't what you think it is?" Song Qingshu was speechless. Cheng Ying's eyes swept over the bed and saw that her cousin's clothes were disheveled, revealing a large patch of pink skin. Perhaps it was because she was being bullied, but her skin was covered with a faint blush. She did not know whether it was because out or because she was angry. Is there any misunderstanding? You. It out. Ing out that out. Ing. Out. No, it's not like that. Before Song Qing Shu could open his mouth, Cheng Yaojia opened her mouth and shyly explained. Cheng Ying knew that her cousin had always been shy and had a weak temperament. But now that she still had this kind of attitude, she could not help but feel angry and distressed. Cousin, don't be afraid. This person treated you like this. We have to get justice for him. Besides, you were forced. Even if brother-in-law finds out in the future, he will certainly not blame you. Cheng Yaojia's face turned red. With great difficulty, she found an opportunity to say, I was not forced. I was willing. What? Cheng Ying's whole body trembled. She looked at her in disbelief. In her heart, her cousin had always been the model of a lady from a noble family. She was virtuous, gentle, and virtuous. How could she do such a thing? Cousin, does he have something on you? Or is he using brother-in-law's life to threaten you? Cheng Ying was an extremely intelligent woman. She quickly thought of all kinds of possibilities. Cheng Yaojia shook her head. She had been afraid that this matter would be known. But now that it had happened, she felt that she was not as afraid as before. Now that she calmed down and said, It's not what you think. Prince Song did not force me or threaten me. I did all of this voluntarily. Moreover, your brother-in-law also knows about this. Brother-in-law also knows? Cheng Ying asked in surprise. Yes. Cheng Yaojia nodded. She pulled the quilt to cover her exposed body. At the same time, she also thoughtfully covered Song Qing Shu, who was next to her, with the quilt. Cheng Ying was suddenly silent. Words could be faked, but these minor actions could not be faked. Her cousin's actions were sincere. Moreover, the tenderness in her eyes moved her. She finally believed what Song Qing Shu had said before. She couldn't help but faintly sigh. Cousin, if you do this, how can you face brother-in-law? Her tone was actually very polite. If it was another woman who did such a thing, she wouldn't even look at them. Cheng Yaojia snappily rolled her eyes. Didn't I say that your brother-in-law knows about this? How is that possible? Cheng Ying frowned. Earlier in the hall, brother-in-law was so respectful to Song Qing Shu. If he knew about the two of you, how could... Although she did not finish her sentence, the meaning behind her words could not be any clearer. Song Qing Shu interrupted. Why can't your brother-in-law know the truth and respect me at the same time? Shut up. I don't want to listen to you. Cheng Ying didn't know why she was so angry. She turned around and looked at Cheng Yaojia. Cousin, you speak. Cheng Yaojia apologetically looked at Song Qing Shu and then explained. Prince Song is right. Your brother-in-law does know about this. At the same time, he still respects Prince Song very much. You all confuse me. Even though Cheng Ying was exceptionally smart, she was still confused by this sentence. Based on common sense, she really couldn't imagine how her brother-in-law would respect the man who made him a cuckold after he knew about it. It's like this, Cheng Yaojia thought for a moment, and then slowly said, You also know that in the old madam's eyes, not having children is a serious mistake. Previously, Xiao Shu and Annie Tang had such a good relationship. In the end, because Annie Tang couldn't give birth to a boy or a girl, the old madam ordered them to divorce. You should know that Xiao Shu is the old madam's flesh and blood, yet she is so heartless. Your brother-in-law and I are in a similar situation. After being married for so many years, my stomach has never had any movement. The old madam's attitude towards his husband and wife has also become worse. Your brother-in-law and I know that it won't be long before we will follow in Xiao Shu's and Annie Tang's footsteps. In desperation, we can only look for Prince Song to borrow a child. As soon as she said the last two words, Cheng Yaojia blushed. It should be known that this was a secret that she had planned to bury in her heart for the rest of her life. If it wasn't because she had no other choice, she wouldn't have said it. You guys are too absurd. Cheng Ying also blushed as she listened. She couldn't help but spit. You and brother-in-law are obviously still young. You have plenty of time. If you slowly nurse your body back to health, you will be able to conceive a child. Why do you have to do this? Cheng Yaojia smiled bitterly and said, There is no time. During the trip to Yangzhou, Your brother-in-law's kidney was injured by an enemy. He can no longer do anything. Ah. Cheng Ying's rosy little mouth opened wide. Her heart was filled with shock. Only then did Cheng Yaojia roughly tell her about the Yangzhou students. She then said, "Young Master Song has saved our lives. Moreover, he has always helped us. We are unable to repay this great kindness. So, in addition to the issue of having an heir, your brother-in-law took the initiative to propose this. We, husband and wife, pleaded countless times before young Master Song reluctantly agreed." Cheng Ying had a strange expression on her face. She thought to herself, just now, he looked like he was completely enjoying it. He didn't look the slightest bit embarrassed. Today, the WeChat public account has updated a new version of Cheng Ying's story that makes the monk drool. Everyone can go take a look. WeChat public account. Monk Liruin edition. Many readers have left messages saying that they don't know where to read the original version. The monk is also very depressed. I should have said this many times. The original version is on the internet, where you can download the Zongheng Novels app, search for the book, and subscribe. In addition, many people have left messages saying that they feel that subscribing to the original version is troublesome, so they give gifts on the WeChat public account. Although the monk appreciates this kind of behavior, if everyone has the time, it is better to subscribe to the original version. After all, the number of subscriptions is related to the monk's importance in Zongheng, as well as his recommendation and so on. Of course, there are even more readers who want to support the monk, but are suffering from lack of money. In fact, it is not impossible to support the monk. There are advertisements at the end of every article on the WeChat public account. If you're interested, you can click on them. The monk should be able to earn some income with each click. I don't know how much money each click equals. After all, the official account has not announced the formula, but it should be about 1 or 2 cents. Of course, this is not something that can be forced. It depends on everyone's mood. 83 Chinese Net. Chapter 1236. Cheng Yaojia suddenly got up and knelt down in front of Cheng Ying. "Cousin, I have a favor to ask of you." Song Qingshu frowned. Fortunately, Cheng Ying helped her up first and stopped her from kneeling down. "Cousin, don't do this. If you don't agree, I won't get up." Cheng Yaojia glanced at Song Qingshu before continuing. "Back then, young Master Song had always refused our request because he knew that if this matter were to be exposed, it would be a huge blow to his reputation. However, in the end, he was unable to withstand our begging and finally agreed. Now that something has happened, how can I let young Master Song take the blame?" When Song Qingshu heard this, he was both angry and amused. At the same time, his heart was moved. He helped Cheng Yaojiao up and lightly said, "You don't need to beg her. I can handle this matter myself. At this time, I somewhat admire your courage, but..." Cheng Ying changed the topic and sneered, "I wonder how Prince Song plans to deal with this matter." Song Qingshu faintly smiled. "The easiest way is to kill you. In this world, only dead people can keep secrets." Cheng Ying was suddenly silent. She knew that he was telling the truth. Now that her acupoints were sealed, she could only be slaughtered. Even if her acupoints were not sealed, with the difference in martial arts between them, she would not be able to resist. Cheng Yaojia cried out in alarm and hurriedly spread her arms in front of Cheng Ying. "Young master, Cheng Ying is my most beloved sister. Don't hurt her." Seeing her action, Cheng Ying's heart warmed. She softly said, "Cousin, you don't have to worry. He won't kill me." Song Qingshu was startled. "How can you be so sure that I won't kill you?" Cheng Ying indifferently said, "If you really wanted to kill me, why would you talk so much nonsense with me?" Song Qingshu laughed. "Miss is really smart and wise. Unfortunately, I still can't figure out how you can ensure that I won't tell anyone." Cheng Ying frowned as if she was very distressed about this matter. "It's very simple. Didn't you promise me something during the day?" At that time, I said that I hadn't thought about it yet and would wait until I thought about it. Now, of course, I have thought about it. Song Qingshu paused, looked into her eyes, and said with a smile, "Miss Cheng is so smart. You should know what it is." Cheng Ying pursed her lips, and there was a hint of anger on her face. At that time, we clearly agreed that it couldn't violate the path of chivalry, and it couldn't be a despicable request. Song Qingshu shrugged. How is this against the path of chivalry? Your cousin and I are both willing parties, so it's not a big deal. Seeing her uncertain expression, Song Qingshu continued. Actually, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. With my current reputation in martial arts, plus my reputation as a playboy, even if this matter were to be exposed, it wouldn't affect me much. On the contrary, it will be talked about enthusiastically. At that time, the one who will be hurt the most is actually your cousin. She won't be accepted by the world. She will be spat on by her husband's family and despised by her maiden family. Secondly, your brother-in-law will be criticized and looked at differently all day long. All right, I promise you. Cheng Ying hurriedly interrupted him, and her face was a little pale. It's a deal. Song Qingshu smiled and released her acupoints. Cheng Ying didn't expect that he would let her go so easily. She said in surprise, Aren't you afraid that I'll go back on my word? Song Qingshu shook his head. Although I haven't met you before, I've been friend with you for a long time. I know that you're a gentleman. Since you promised me, you naturally won't go back on your word. Friends with you for a long time. Cheng Ying murmured to herself. This was the second time she heard this. She always had a feeling that he was her old friend, but she knew nothing about him. The feeling of being seen through inside and out made her feel very uncomfortable. Cousin, thank you. Cheng Yaojia held Cheng Ying's hand and said gratefully. She knew that her cousin had always been upright. The reason why she agreed to hide this from her was probably because of her. Cheng Ying also felt a myriad of emotions for her cousin's misfortune. The two women hugged each other and whispered to each other. No one knew what they said, but in the end, they both burst into tears. On the side, Song Qingshu was very depressed. He knocked on the bed and coughed. Miss Cheng, it's getting late. You should go back to sleep. Cheng Ying opened her mouth in surprise. She looked at him for a while. After a long time, she snorted, Why didn't Prince Song go back to sleep? Song Qingshu laughed. Speaking of this, it's all your fault. If you hadn't deliberately teased me this afternoon, making my blood boil and making my heart fire unbearable, how could I have come to your cousin's place? Cheng Ying originally wanted to denounce him, but when she heard his words, her face instantly turned red. It was as if her whole head was so hot that it was about to emit air from her ears, especially when she thought that he had clearly heard what she had said to her cousin. She suddenly wished that she could die immediately. Cheng Yaojia felt sorry for her little sister and tried to smooth things over for her. Gongzi, cousin is so pure and innocent. She really didn't do it on purpose. Song Qingshu smiled. Of course I know Miss Cheng didn't do it on purpose. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in your bed right now, but in hers. In the end, Cheng Ying couldn't stand his teasing. She jumped out of the bed and put on her dress while covering her chest. She said in panic, I'm going back first. I won't disturb you anymore. Song Qingshu couldn't help laughing. Why are you covering your chest? I obviously can't see anything. Don't make it look like I'm taking advantage of you. In the end, Cheng Ying couldn't restrain herself. She turned her head and looked at him bitterly. Gongzi, haven't you taken advantage of me enough today? The moonlight shone in through the window and sprinkled on her body. It was as if a layer of silver gauze had been draped over her body, making her look extremely graceful and moving. Song Qingshu's heart warmed up when he saw the look in her eyes. He said, I suddenly changed my mind. Cheng Ying was confused. Suddenly, she felt a huge force on her body, and her whole body involuntarily flew toward the bed. Song Qingshu stretched out his arms and held her in his arms. Cheng Ying struggled to get up, but her whole body went numb and her acupoints were sealed. She couldn't help but be startled and angry. What do you want to do? Nothing. It's just an extra layer of insurance. Song Qingshu put her down on the bed and said with a smile, The most fickle thing in the world is the human heart. Although Miss is a gentleman now, it's hard to guarantee that she will change her mind in the future. Only by tying Miss and Yaojia to the same boat can we be safe. Gongzi, what do you want to do? Cheng Yaojia held his arm with a worried expression as if she was worried that he would hurt her cousin. It's nothing. Song Qingshu's first sentence made the two women heave a sigh of relief, but the second sentence instantly made their beautiful faces pale, It's just letting her sleep with us, that's all. Chapter 12:37. Hearing Song Qingshu's words, Cheng Ying suddenly felt ashamed and indignant. At the same time, there was an inexplicable sense of loss in her heart. In fact, she had a good impression of Song Qingshu before. Sleep, sleep. Cheng Yaojiao was also startled. She thought that it was fine if she accompanied him. But how could her innocent cousin accompany him? Seeing the two women's expressions, Song Qingshu knew that they had misunderstood. He couldn't help but gloomily say, "What are you thinking? I'm just letting her sleep here for one night. I won't do anything to her. Even if she goes to tell others, they will definitely ask her about the details. The fact that she slept with us will naturally be exposed. Who will believe that she is still innocent at that time?" "You're so vicious." Cheng Ying's hands and feet suddenly turned cold. As smart as she was, she immediately understood the severity of the situation. Even if Song Qingshu didn't do anything to her tonight, people would definitely doubt him in today's society. With all kinds of rumors and slanders, even if she was innocent, her reputation would be completely ruined. Song Qingshu lightly said, "This isn't viciousness. It's just a manipulation of human nature. If I were really viciousness, wouldn't it be easier to just take off your clothes and take your body?" Cheng Ying was silent. She knew that what he said was true. If she put herself in his shoes, it would be difficult for her to easily believe him just because of a promise. But now, it was a blessing in a misfortune. "Miss Cheng, you can rest assured that I won't be rude to you. Just take it as sleeping here. When you wake up tomorrow, everything will be fine," Song Qingshu said, and was about to hit her sleeping acupoint. "Stop," Cheng Ying anxiously said. Song Qingshu was startled and looked at her with a puzzled expression. "Don't hit my acupoint. I have to stay awake. Otherwise, how will I know if you won't take advantage of me falling asleep?" Cheng Ying paused and blushed. Then she continued, Take advantage of me. Actually, I understand your concern, but Song Qingshu had a strange look on his face. "But I'm going to be intimate with your cousin. Are you sure you want to stay awake and stay aside?" Cheng Yaojia cried out in alarm. Her face was as red as a red veil. She also began to comfort her. Secretly being together with Song Qingshu was already an unprecedented act of boldness. If she were to do it in front of her little sister, just thinking about the scene would make her want to find a hole to hide in. "No, I must stay awake." If it was any other matter, Cheng Ying might have agreed to it. However, this matter concerned her innocence, so how could she be careless? Although she knew that her cousin wouldn't harm her, she also knew that with her cousin's weak temperament, if Song Qingshu really did something to her, she probably wouldn't be able to stop him. Cheng Ying didn't want to lose her virginity in her sleep. "Well, since you insist, then do as you please. But don't regret it later." Song Qingshu stopped Cheng Yaojia from continuing to persuade her. He hugged her and rolled into the bed. Don't. Thinking that her cousin was still next to her, Cheng Yaojia couldn't bring herself to do it. She hurriedly tried to push him away with a red face. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Don't worry, she can't see it." Cheng Ying was lying on the outermost side of the bed. Her acupoint had been hit, so she really couldn't see what was going on. Cheng Yaojia cried out in alarm. She didn't know where she was being touched. Her voice carried a trace of pleading. "But she can hear us." Song Qingshu moved closer to her ear and whispered, "Then you can hold back and not make a sound." Cheng Yaojia's heart was shaken by the hot air blowing into her ear. Before she could react, the other party pressed down heavily on her. Her whole body trembled, but she didn't dare to make sound. She could only gently hit his chest in protest. After an unknown amount of time, Cheng Ying's face turned red. At this moment, her heart was full of regret. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have insisted on waking up. Although Cheng Yaojia deliberately suppressed her voice, it was the dead of night and they were on the same bed. How could Cheng Ying not hear it? The woman's coquettish moans, the man's heavy breathing, and the sound of their bodies colliding with each other accompanied the swaying of the bed. Although Cheng Ying was a young girl who had never had sex, her mind could still clearly picture the scene of the man next to her. While her face and ears were flushed, her body couldn't help but soften. When Cheng Ying woke up the next day, She couldn't help but be shocked. She subconsciously sat up and checked that her clothes were intact. Only then did she let out a long sigh of relief. "You're awake?" Her cousin's gentle and shy voice came from not far away. Cheng Ying looked toward the direction of the voice and saw Cheng Yaojia sitting in front of the dressing table. She didn't know if it was because of last night's rain and dew, but today her face was especially radiant. Only then did Cheng Ying realize that her acupoints had naturally been unsealed. She couldn't help but look to the side and saw that the quilt on the bed was neat and tidy. There was no trace of that man. As if she knew what she was looking for, Cheng Yaojia got up and walked over to her. "There's no need to look. Prince Song left at dawn. I know you were frightened, and it wasn't easy for you to fall asleep, so I didn't wake you when I got up." Hearing this, Cheng Ying's face turned red, and she secretly spat out a mouthful of saliva. She thought that the two of you had been tossing and turning until late last night. "It would be strange if I could sleep." Cheng Yaojia sat down beside her and held her hand. She quietly said, "Cousin, don't blame Prince Song. He did it for me." Cheng Ying pursed her lips and said, "I don't know what kind of magic soup he gave you, but you treat him much better than you treated brother-in-law." Cheng Yaojia's face also turned red. She softly said, "He is an immortal-like man. If you get along with him for a long time, maybe you will also fall for him." "I won't be like you," Cheng Ying said coldly. However, as soon as the words came out of her mouth, she realized that they were a bit hurtful. She had always been kind and didn't want to see her cousin sad. However, the impact of what happened last night was too great. She really couldn't communicate with her cousin calmly. After putting on her clothes, she got up and said, "I'll go back to see Wu Shuang first." She had only taken 2 steps when she stopped. Then her white face instantly turned red. It turned out that she had felt that the bottom of her skirt was a bit wet and cold. Thinking of how her body had reacted after listening to him all night, she felt so wrong that she almost cried. Seeing her suddenly stop, Cheng Yaojia asked with concern, "Are you not feeling well?" "It's nothing." Cheng Ying pursed her lips and left as if she was fleeing. Along the way, Cheng Ying cursed Song Qingshu half to death in her heart. She wanted to go Wu Shuang's place first to see how she was doing. Then she would take a bath and change her clothes. Otherwise, the cold feeling of her clothes sticking to her skin would make her feel extremely uncomfortable. Cheng Ying had always been meticulous. She didn't want her cousin to see through her thoughts and worry her. She tidied up her appearance at the door and then opened it. "Wu Shuang," but her voice suddenly stopped. It turned out that at this time, Song Qingshu was sitting beside Wu Shuang's bed, talking and laughing with her. Previously, in the public account's automatic reply, there were missing pictures of Gebai, Wanyan Zhongzhe, Little Tong Ho, Li Qiushui, and her sister, Tianshan Tonglao, and others. Everyone can send the names of the female characters in this book to the public account. The system will automatically return a picture of the corresponding character. Remember to make sure that there are no typos in the full name. Finally, I would like to thank all the readers for helping to click on the advertisement at the end of the article. Yesterday, there were more than 300 people who clicked on the article, several times more than usual. Chapter 1238. Seeing the two of them talking and laughing in the room, Cheng Ying felt her blood boil. She rushed over and pulled Song Qingshu off the bed. Then, she stood between the two of them and glared at him like a mother hen protecting her chicks. "What do you want?" Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. "Shouldn't I be the one asking you that question?" "That's right." Lu Wushuang also reacted at this time. "Brother Song is here to check on my injuries." "Cousin, what are you doing?" "Brother Song?" Cheng Ying was angry. Yesterday, when she was with Yanghua, she often bickered with Wufu. She never had a good impression of that unruly and willful daughter. Cheng Ying was speechless for a moment. She couldn't tell her what happened last night. Could she? She was doing it for Lu Wushuang's own good, but now she was being blamed by her cousin. She couldn't tell her the truth, so she felt very depressed. Lu Wushuang also couldn't understand why her cousin, who had always been polite to others, was acting like this today. However, she had something more important to worry about, so she didn't think too much about it. "Brother Song, yesterday you mentioned that Sha Dan is Brother Yang's fiancé. What's going on?" Even Cheng Ying, who was sulking, was instantly attracted by this and pricked up her ears to listen. It's like this: Brother Yang's grandfather is the Jin Kingdom's King Zhao, Wanyan Honglai. Back then, he was betrothed to the Pu Cha family's leader. Song Qingshu finally told her about the Jin Kingdom. What? Sha Dan is from the Jin Kingdom. After hearing this, Lu Wushuang couldn't hold back anymore and exclaimed. Cheng Ying was also shocked. As people of the Song dynasty, they were taught from a young age that there was a blood feud with the Jin Kingdom. Now that they suddenly found out about Yang Guo's true identity, they couldn't accept it for a moment. It's just fate. Brother Yang can't choose for himself, Song Qingshu explained on behalf of Yang Guo. But whether he's from the Song dynasty or the Jin Kingdom, Brother Yang is still a man of indomitable spirit. Why do the two of you care so much? That's right. No matter what, he's still my idiot. Lu Wushuang was more straightforward and was the first to recover. Cheng Ying's heart was not inferior to Huang Rong's, and she thought about many things. After a long time, she asked, with Miss Long's personality, even if Brother Yang is a golden man, she wouldn't mind. They love each other so much. Why aren't they together? I'm not too sure about the reason, but it's fate. Song Qingshu sighed, thinking that in the original novel, Yang Guo and Xiao Long Nu had suffered enough, but in this world, it was even worse. Yang Guo was a Jin man, and Xiao Long Nu was Yu Fei's orphan. Yu Fei vowed to fight against the Jin all his life, and the Jin man hated Yu Fei to the core. Not only did they have a feud between them, but now they also had a family feud. However, Song Qingshu sighed with emotion, and, at the same time, he was secretly delighted. Otherwise, Yang Guo and Xiao Long Nu's love was stronger than the Jin, and he was afraid that he really had no chance at all. But now, the two depended on their own ability. Cheng Ying and Lu Wushuang still wanted to continue to inquire about Yang Guo, but suddenly a maid ran to the door and said, "Prince Song, Master invites you to the study. He has something important to discuss with you." Song Qingshu frowned slightly, and then asked with a smile, "Do you know what it is?" The maid didn't expect him to be so polite. He was handsome and had a good attitude, so the maid had a good impression of him. "I don't know. I only know that third young master is back, and it may have something to do with this." "Well, lead the way, Mississippi." After Song Qingshu got up and said goodbye to Cheng Ying and Lu Wushuang, he was led by the maid to the direction of the study. Since Lu Guanyin was back, he must have brought back important news from Lin. Looking at his back as he left, Cheng Ying had a strange look on her face. She thought that if her brother-in-law came back a few hours earlier and happened to bump into Song Qingshu on her cousin's bed, would he really not be angry, as her sister said? After Song Qingshu arrived at the study, he found that 6 Zhan, 6 Yu, and 6 Guanyin were standing respectfully in the study, looking at the back of another person. That person's back was facing the door, and he was flipping through the precious ancient books on the bookshelf. As he flipped through, he sighed. It is said that the books of the 6 families are richer than those of the imperial palace. I didn't believe it before, but I really admire it today. Prime Minister, you flatter me. 6 Zhan responded respectfully. Beside him, 6 Yu also followed his father to salute, but he had a hangover on his face. Obviously, he drank too much last night and was not fully sober yet. Hearing the movement of Song Qingshu entering the door, several people in the room turned around one after another. The person with his back facing the door also turned around and looked at Song Qingshu with a smile. "I haven't seen you for a long time. Prince Song is still so handsome," Song Qingshu said with a smile. "Isn't Prime Minister Han still as elegant as ever?" At the same time, he was secretly shocked. He did not expect that Han Xingzhou would come in person. Although the distance between Lin and Shanin was not far, it was not close either. Calculating the time, Han Xingzhou probably did not delay at all after seeing Lu Guanyin and rushed through the night to come here so quickly. After the two exchanged greetings for a while, Han Xingzhou suddenly looked at him with a faint smile. Now, the Golden Snake Camp and the Southern Song Dynasty have stationed hundreds of thousands of troops along the Yangtze River, and the war is about to start. I wonder what is the matter for young master to come here at this time? Song Qingshu said with a smile. Sightseeing and visiting some old friends. Is that so? Han Xingzhou suddenly changed the topic. I think Prince Song is here to ask for peace. Song Qingshu did not comment, but replied lightly. Prime Minister Han rushed over from Lin and overnight. I am afraid that he is here to ask for peace. Han Xingzhou was startled, realizing that he had acted too eagerly and had been seen through by the other party. But the situation in the court was changing rapidly and did not allow him to take his time. Why does Prince Song say this? Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Even if everyone in the Southern Song dynasty wants to go to war with the Golden Snake Camp, Prime Minister Han is not one of them. The biggest enemy in Prime Minister Han's heart is the Jin Kingdom. He wants to wipe away the shame of Jinkong and subdue the country. For this, he has planned for decades. Now that he is about to succeed, how can he let the court be distracted by the Golden Snake Camp? After all, Song Qingshu came from the later generations, so he knew Han Xingzhou's ambition. In addition, he had learned from Zishan Dragon Queen that her husband, Han Qinya, was also a spy sent by Han Xingzhou to the Jin Kingdom 20 years ago, so he was sure of everything. Having his thoughts seen through, Han Xingzhou could not help but be shocked and angry. But he had been in the officialdom for many years, so he quickly adjusted. Fine, let's not beat around the bush. I don't want the court to go to war with the Golden Snake Camp, and young master obviously has the same idea. In that case, how about we stick to the agreement we made in Yangzhou? Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, Now, I am afraid that Prime Minister Han is not the only one in charge of the Southern Song dynasty, right? Han Xingzhou frowned. Is young master worried about something? Chapter 1239. Han Xingzhou's face heated up. He knew that Wei Xiaobao was mocking him. Last time, they had clearly made an agreement in Yangzhou, but as soon as Ma Qichun arrived, everything changed. Because of this matter, he had to greet all 18 generations of Ma Qichun's ancestors at home. Percent M, I'm afraid you're worried about Ma Qichun, Han Xingzhou explained. Yes, it was Ma Qichun who made trouble last time, but now he is like a skeleton in a grave and can't do anything again. Don't worry, young master. A skeleton in a grave? Song Qingshu chuckled. What do you mean? Han Xingzhou also laughed. Ma Qichun used to tie the imperial court to the same worship as him. But now that Li Kaxiu has been captured by young master and the Jiangnan Green Camp has been destroyed, Ma Qichun has no one to rely on. Many people in the imperial court accuse him, and the situation is on the verge of collapse. If it weren't for his many years of hard work, the emperor would have already removed him from the position of prime minister. Many years of hard work, Song Qingshu said coldly. Ma Qichun has done all kinds of bad things. What hard work can he have? Is it his hard work to frame Yu Fei? He had always respected Yu Fei, and the more he spoke, the more indignant he became. Han Xingzhou laughed awkwardly, but didn't agree. Yu Fei's case was the biggest injustice in the Southern Song dynasty and the biggest minefield of the imperial court. Although they knew Yu Fei was wronged, no one dared to bring up reversing the verdict. After all, it was the emperor who made the decision. If they reversed the verdict for Yu Fei, wouldn't it be a slap in the face to the emperor? Song Qingshu was an outsider, so he naturally could say these things. Han Chuanzhou, on the other hand, had been in the imperial court for many years, so he had learned to be mature and prudent. He would play it safe and play it safe, so he naturally would not get involved. However, he admired Song Qingshu's indignation very much. It must be known that he had always despised Qin Hui and Wan Qifeng's conduct. Moreover, he was bent on conquering the Central Plains to wash away the humiliation of Jinkong. Naturally, Yu Fei was his confidant. Even without Ma Qichun, your imperial court seems to have another heavyweight, Song Qingshu said suddenly. Do you mean Jia Shidao, young master? Han Xingzhou's expression suddenly became very strange. I'm afraid he doesn't have the time to care about this. Not long ago, his son made a big mistake. That matter involved the palace, and Song Qingshu was, after all, an outsider. Han Xingzhou deliberately avoided mentioning it. But how could he know that Song Qingshu was personally involved from beginning to end? The emperor was furious. Concubine Jia was banished to the cold palace, and Jia Shidao was demoted. His power was weakened to the extreme. Han Xingzhou gloated and tried to control himself from laughing out loud. It took him a lot of effort to save his son's life and send him to Mongolia as a hostage to atone for his crimes. However, the Mongolian delegation disappeared for no reason, and his son is also missing. Jia Shidao is now focusing all his energy on investigating this matter. Song Qingshu was shocked. He thought that Jia Shidao had not only lost his son, but also so many top experts of the Island of Heroes. It would be strange if he wasn't anxious. With his power in the imperial court and the intelligence network of the Island of Heroes, he might really find out that it was Song Qingshu. With such concerns in his heart, Song Qingshu asked calmly, "Oh, I wonder if you found anything?" Han Xingzhou also frowned. This matter is very strange. The Mongolian delegation was made up of elite riders, and they were accompanied by many top experts. I don't know who could make such a powerful team disappear in a thin air. However, I found the Imperial Army at the scene. Someone must have used the army. I think the mastermind behind this is probably Machi-chun. Song Qingshu thought to himself. Machi-chun was bold enough to send out 500 elite cavalrymen. It was a good person to take the blame. Unfortunately, although she could fool others, she probably couldn't fool Jia Shidao. The 18 top experts of the Island of Heroes were all masters. Even if they were faced with 500 elite cavalrymen, they wouldn't be completely wiped out. None of them would be able to escape. Han Xingzhou smiled and said, "Does that make you feel relieved? I hope everything goes well." Song Qingshu nodded. The two sides continued to discuss and finally reached a preliminary agreement according to the agreement they had made in Yangzhou. However, things were different now. Song Qingshu had more confidence to fight for more benefits. Although Han Xingzhou was in a difficult position, he didn't refuse. In the end, Han Xingzhou said, "Tomorrow morning, you'll follow me back to Lin and I will arrange for the emperor to meet you. However, there's a problem now." What problem? Song Qingshu had no interest in entering the palace for an audience, and he was not worried about encountering any danger. After all, with his current martial arts, he could come and go as he pleased even in the palace. Who could stop him from leaving? Young master must have a reason for entering the palace this time. If you don't have anything, everyone will think that young master is here to ask for peace. At that time, those officials will definitely be insatiable, and their harsh conditions will most likely anger young master. Han Xingzhou explained patiently. He didn't think this was treason. After all, there was no hatred between the Southern Song dynasty and the Golden Snake Camp. Moreover, they were all Han people, and to some extent, they could use the power of the Golden Snake Camp. In the hearts of Han Xingzhou and all the people of the Southern Song dynasty, the number one enemy was the Jin Kingdom. Not long ago, he received news that the Jin Kingdom was in chaos, and it was a good opportunity for him to conquer the Central Plains. Because of Machi Feng and Li Kaxiu, he had been delayed for a long time. He was worried that if he talked peace with the Golden Snake Camp, he would waste too much time. If he waited for the Jin Kingdom to completely recover from the civil strife, he would really miss the golden opportunity. Compared with the loss of soldiers and the expenditure of money and provisions, the concession to the Golden Snake Camp was almost negligible. May I let Minister Han know that I didn't come to the south to seek peace, but to ask for a marriage? Song Qingshu said confidently. The Golden Snake Camp had discussed this issue for a long time. Finally, it was Zhao Min who came up with the idea of changing peace to marriage, which solved the problem in an instant. Marriage? Han Xingzhou was surprised at first, but then he clapped his hands and praised. How wonderful! Last time, young master rescued the princesses from the laundry yard in the Jin Kingdom. With this kindness, it would be hard for the imperial court not to concede. The other ministers also have nothing to say. Then the two sides discussed some specific details and finally agreed to set off for the capital early the next morning. Then, Chancellor Liu arranged for the residents to prepare a banquet to welcome Han Xingzhou. At the same time, he welcomed Song Qingshu's arrival. Because the discussion was almost over and everyone had gained something, the atmosphere at the banquet was very warm. It could be said that both the guests and the host were happy. Dudu 2. After the song ended and the crowd dispersed, Song Qing-shu reeked of alcohol as a maidservant helped him back to his courtyard. Even though the maidservant was pretty, Song Qing-shu was used to seeing stunning beauties, so how could he be tempted by them? After the maidservant left, Song Qing-shu, who had been pretending to be drunk, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were full of sobriety. Ah, should I go to Cheng Yaojia's place tonight? Song Qing-shu hesitated. If he didn't go, he would be lonely and unable to sleep. If he went, Lu Guining had just returned. He had to consider his feelings. After all, he didn't want to plant the seed of hatred in his heart. While he was in a dilemma, Song Qing-shu suddenly had an idea. He walked out of the door and quietly looked outside the courtyard. Since you are here, why don't you come out to meet me? Prince Song really has a good cultivation. My heart just beat faster, and you found out. A figure slowly walked in from the door of the courtyard. Under the moonlight, he was wearing a green robe. He had sharp eyebrows and thin lips, and his face was full of unruly expression. A strange expression appeared on Song Qing-shu's face. He cupped his hands and said, "Brother Linghu, long time no see." The person in front of him was naturally Linghu Chong. He had been recommended to the palace by Han Xingzhou and became one of the most mysterious and glorious imperial guards. However, the emperor remembered Han Xingzhou's hard work and high merits, so he specially assigned him to protect Han Xingzhou as a sign of the emperor's favor. When Han Xingzhou left Lin, and this time, Linghu Chong had been secretly protecting him. He didn't show up during the day, so at first Song Qing-shu didn't know. "It hasn't been long since we parted in Yangzhou," Linghu Chong said coldly. Song Qing-shu knew that Linghu Chong had been holding a grudge against him for taking Ren Yingying away, so he didn't care about the coldness in Linghu Chong's tone. He smiled and said, "Speaking of which, I still have to thank Brother Linghu for your help last time." Linghu Chong snorted. "At that time, I didn't have the intention to save you. I just thought that you were dead because of the golden ripple flower. If I had known that you would escape later, I would never have done that, so you don't have to thank me." Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Linghu Chong is really open and above board. Song Mao admires you very much. But didn't I make it clear to Brother Linghu last time? There's no reason for you to hate me so much. You might as well focus on pursuing your little sister apprentice." Linghu Chong's face darkened, and he didn't answer. Dudu 3. Song Qing-shu shrugged and didn't take it seriously. He continued to curry favor with him. "Did Brother Linghu act, as I said last time? How is the progress with Missy now?" Linghu Chong continued to stay silent. After a long time, he finally said, "I've received orders from others, so I'll be loyal to them. I don't have the time to look for little sister apprentice." Song Qing-shu almost choked to death. He said gloomily, "Why are you so honest? You're already lagging behind others. Why don't you seize the time to increase Miss Yu's favorability? If you do, she'll really become someone else's wife." Clang! With a dragon's roar, Linghu Chong unsheathed his sword and pointed it at Chu Li. Linghu Chong, am open and above board. I don't use those methods to deceive little sister apprentice." Song Qing-shu had a strange expression on his face. How can it be called deceiving someone who sincerely pursues the woman he loves? There's no need to say anymore. Linghu Chong shouted, "You're not poisoned this time, so I can openly seek revenge on you. Draw your sword." Song Qing-shu sighed. "Is it still because of Yingying?" Linghu Chong didn't say anything. It was obvious that he agreed. "You're no match for me." Song Qing-shu shook his head. "If I were you, I would definitely have made my move back in Yangzhou. Otherwise, I would have found a chance to assassinate her. Why would I come looking for me so openly?" Linghu Chong said coldly, "If I did that, wouldn't I be in cahoots with you? Make your move. Don't brag too early." Hearing the confidence in his tone, Song Qing-shu made a sound of surprise and seriously sized him up. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Compared to before, your cultivation has indeed improved a lot. Did you have some fortuitous encounter recently?" Chapter 1240. Don't waste your breath. Take this. Linghu Chong didn't have the patience to continue talking. He exerted force with his feet and thrust his sword in Song Qingshu's direction. The long sword let out a dragon's roar, and the sword's chi seemed to fuse with the moonlight, enveloping an area with a radius of about 3 meters around Song Qingshu. Ling Huchang's personality would never have taken the initiative to attack, but he knew that Song Qingshu's martial arts were unfathomable, so he didn't dare to be careless. Of course, he had always been frank. Even if he took the initiative to attack, he would say it in advance and didn't launch a sneak attack. If there was a third person watching from his side, he would be shocked to find that Ling Huchang seemed to have suddenly turned into several figures, sometimes in front, sometimes behind, sometimes above, sometimes below. The tip of the sword kept moving, but it was moving in an extremely mysterious trajectory, getting closer and closer to Song Qingshu. 9 Strategies Beyond the Swords really lives up to its name. Song Qingshu clicked his tongue in admiration. He finally moved. He took a light step forward, and the dazzling sword shadows that filled the sky disappeared without a trace. The courtyard immediately fell into a strange silence. Looking at the tip of the sword that was firmly caught by his opponent's 2 fingers, Ling Huchang's face suddenly turned red. How is this possible? This was the only thought in his mind. The most dangerous enemy he had faced in his life was when he and Ren Wuxing fought against Dongfang Bubi. At that time, Dongfang Bubi could kill a top expert with one move, and he still had the strength to fight back at such a fast speed. He used the ingenuity of 9 strategies beyond the swords and his fighting style to make both sides suffer, so Dongfang Bubi couldn't do anything to him for a while. But now, he felt that compared to when he was at Blackwood Cliff, both his inner strength and sword technique were a level higher. Who knew that his sword, which he was determined to win, would be so easily blocked by his opponent? The greatest characteristic of 9 solitary swords was that once he saw the weakness in his opponent's attack, he would immediately take advantage of it and attack first. He would then win with one move. Dongfang Bubi might have been fast earlier, but there were still weaknesses in his attacks. It was just that they disappeared in a flash, and it was very difficult for others to grasp them. But when he faced Song Qingshu, Ling Huchang did not even manage to see his attack before he was subdued. He seemed to have an illusion that he had lost his memory for a few breaths of time. He didn't know what happened in between. When he regained his memory, his sword was already caught by his opponent's fingers. However, he was also very clear that he had been very clear-headed from beginning to end, but the tip of his sword had been inexplicably caught by the other party. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. "Brother Linghu, you're no match for me. Why are you so stubborn?" Although 9 solitary sword was close to a rule martial art, it was still a painting, after all. His imminent skyline had already vaguely broken through the limits of space. At that moment, the two of them were not in the same dimension. Naturally, Ling Huchang could not see his attack. Hearing his opponent's words, Ling Huchang's expression immediately turned extremely ugly. He had always been fearless, so he coldly snorted and channeled his inner strength to attack his opponent through the tip of his sword. He thought to himself that he could not see his opponent's attack, but his inner strength was real and could not be faked at all. I don't believe that you can still be so relaxed. Competing in inner strength? Song Qingshu instantly understood his opponent's thoughts. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Linghu, the foundation of your absorbing star's great skill is not stable. If you meet a real expert, you'll hurt yourself?" Huh? His expression suddenly changed. He was shocked to find that his opponent did not try to use the absorbing star's great skill to absorb his inner strength. Instead, a vigorous inner strength surged from the tip of his sword. It turned out that Ling Huchang was afraid of Song Qingshu's majestic inner strength. He was worried that he would let a wolf into the house and hurt his meridians. Therefore, he did not use the absorbing star's great skill at the beginning. Instead, he started to compete with him in inner strength. Ling Huchang's expression was solemn. He did not look as relaxed as his opponent. This was a crucial moment in the competition of inner strength. How could he dare to open his mouth and leak his genuine chi? At the same time, he was extremely shocked. His opponent was competing with him in inner strength, yet he still had the leisure to speak. Was his opponent's power just a notch higher than his? This inner strength? Song Qingshu frowned slightly. He felt that it was very familiar. After thinking for a while, he understood. So it's the Shaolin Temple's muscle bone strengthening scripture. Congratulations, Brother Linghu, for learning the supreme secret of the Shaolin Temple. If I'm not wrong, it should have been Master Feng Zheng who taught you. Linghu Cheng was even more shocked. Why did he feel that nothing could escape his discerning eyes? Song Qingshu also sighed. It seemed that this world would correct the plot to a certain extent and make it more like the original story. Linghu Cheng had learned the muscle bone strengthening scripture. At the same time, Song Qingshu was also secretly vigilant. Feng Zheng would not teach Linghu Cheng the muscle bone strengthening scripture without any reason. It must have been instructed by the Shaolin Temple. Over the years, he had made many enemies with the Shaolin Temple. They learned of the hatred between him and Linghu Cheng, so they used him to restrain him to a certain extent. It was really a good plan. They are really haunting me. Song Qingshu was angry. He thought that one day, he would make this group of bald donkeys return to secular life together to vent his hatred. But he soon gave up the idea. After all, the Shaolin Temple had been passed down for 1,000 years. It had its own reasons. Besides, there were also many good monks in the Shaolin Temple. It would be too abrupt to kill them all. Speaking of which, the Sanskrit version of the Shaolin Temple is still in my hands. It's just that no one can read Sanskrit, so I haven't been able to crack the secret. Song Qingshu secretly frowned. In this world, there were even fewer people who knew Sanskrit than the crested ibis in the future. In the world of the Golden Book, he only knew that Huang Chong, Reverend Yideng, Yideng's junior brother, Jiumaji, and a few senior monks of the Shaolin Temple knew Sanskrit. He was not a friend of the Shaolin Temple, and the muscle bone strengthening scripture originally belonged to the Shaolin Temple, so he naturally could not ask them for help. So he ruled out Jiumaji for now. Although he was a good friend of Song Qingshu, he was not a good person. Song Qingshu was worried that he would cause endless trouble after learning the muscle bone strengthening scripture, so he deliberately translated the scripture. Huang Chong was a scholar who had written the general principles of Nine in Sanskrit, so he naturally knew Sanskrit. Unfortunately, he was probably a long time ago. After thinking about it, only Reverend Yideng and his junior brother were the most suitable candidates. But during this time, Song Qingshu had been running around everywhere and had not found a chance to visit them. And even if he found one, how to get him to translate the scripture would be a big problem. Song Qingshu was not a saint, so he did not want to share the divine kung fu with outsiders. Moreover, he had stolen the muscle bone strengthening scripture from the Shaolin Temple. If the news leaked out, there would be a huge uproar. As for the diagram that Yutan had coincidentally found in the muscle bone strengthening scripture, it was drawn with a kind of Indian herb soaked in water. It appeared when it was wet and disappeared when it was dry. The postures and routes in the diagram were not the original muscle bone strengthening scripture, but an extremely mysterious Indian yoga technique from the Mogadishu kingdom. It was called the Samadhi meditation to achieve Shinzu Sutra, which had nothing to do with the muscle bone strengthening scripture. The Shinzu Sutra was originally a wonderful method to dispel external demons during practice. It was a secret yoga technique created by the ancient masters of the Indian kingdom. Therefore, the person in the diagram was also an Indian monk. Song Qingshu changed his mind. Compared to the muscle bone strengthening scripture, maybe the Samadhi meditation to achieve Shinzu Sutra would be more useful to him. He practiced the Mary Diana of the esoteric sect. What he feared most was the invasion of the inner demons. The greatest effect of the Samadhi meditation to achieve Shinzu Sutra was to dispel the inner demons produced during practice. When Linghu Cheng saw that Song Qingshu was frowning and happy, he thought that Song Qingshu had been possessed by the devil. He could not help but feel overjoyed. He poured more internal force into Song Qingshu. Unfortunately, no matter how much internal force he mobilized to attack, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no reaction at all. Because Song Qingshu was lost in thought, he did not notice the abnormality. He just instinctively dispelled the opponent's attack. After an unknown period of time, Ling Hucheng felt that his internal force was about to be exhausted. He was like a lamp that had run out of oil. All he could do was to grit his teeth and endure. Fortunately, at the last moment, Song Qingshu finally came to his senses and gradually withdrew his internal force. Ling Hucheng finally could not hold on. He dejectedly half-knelt on the ground, as if he had just been fished out of the water. His whole body was drenched from head to toe. Song Qingshu sighed. "Brother Linghu, in fact, I have always admired your character and breadth of mind. But now that Yingying and I have tied the knot, why do you still have to force me? Considering that you helped me in Yangzhou last time, I will not make things difficult for you this time. You can go now." In fact, in his heart, how could he not know that letting Ling Hucheng go again and again was like letting a tiger in his bosom? Maybe one day, Ling Hucheng would pay the price for his arrogance. But in his previous life, he had always admired Ling Hucheng's free, uninhibited, open-minded, and cheerful temperament, as well as his noble and unsullied character. In addition, he had indeed used some dishonorable methods to steal Ren Yingying. In his heart, he always felt that he owed Ling Hucheng. After coming to this chaotic world and experiencing all kinds of tribulations, the current Song Qingshu's heart was becoming more and more hard on the surface. But in the end, he was still a kind person. In the depths of his heart, there was a ridiculous persistence. It was because of this trace of kindness and persistence that his temperament did not change as his martial arts advanced by leaps and bounds. After a long time, Ling Hucheng struggled to stand up from the ground. He looked at him with a complicated expression. "Even if you let me go this time, next time I will not be lenient." Song Qingshu faintly smiled. "I already said that this time is to repay Brother Linghu's kindness of helping me last time. You don't need to take it to heart. In the end, I still have a suggestion. Rather than wasting time on me, it would be better to spend more energy to win back Junior Sister's affection. Don't worry about it." Ling Hucheng harumphed, turned around, and staggered away. Perhaps it was because he had lost too miserably this time. His back was filled with loneliness. Song Qingshu shook his head. Just as he was about to go back to rest, he suddenly thought of something. "That's right, Lu Wushuang's injured leg needs to be changed every few days. I didn't think that I would leave tomorrow morning, so I didn't have time to give her the remaining black jade ointment." Just as he was about to call over a maid and have her give the remaining ointment to him, Song Qingshu remembered that the black jade ointment was extremely precious. If there was a slight mistake along the way, Lu Wushuang's leg might never recover. After hesitating again and again, he decided to personally hand the ointment to Lu Wushuang. Using the cover of the night, he headed to the pavilion where Lu Wushuang lived. Today, the official account just happened to be updated with Lu Wushuang. I don't know why, but I can't get the last picture out of my mind. She clearly isn't a beauty that can cause the downfall of the city, but that posture and that charm always make people have messy thoughts. After thinking about it, I'll have little Song go look for her. Also, today a book friend, Mushan, left a message on the official account. "Monk, I've specially come to reward you. My wife and I have plans to have our first child in the first month. It was also because of your dirty plot. Do your best. Use your writing ability more. When the child is successfully delivered, I will definitely come back to thank you again." This monk never thought that his writing would have this kind of merit. If this was in ancient times, once this reputation spread, wouldn't all the aunts and young madams in the surrounding villages run to me to beg for children? Just thinking about it makes me excited. Finally, let's all congratulate this book friend. Chapter 1241. Lu Wushuang's room was in the inner chambers of the Lu mansion, and Song Qingshu was arranged to stay in a guest room on the other side. If he went there openly, it would inevitably alarm the other people in the Lu mansion. Although he had a clear conscience, if he went to visit an unmarried girl in the middle of the night, it was inevitable that other people would have some messy thoughts. Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment. In order to save trouble, he finally decided to go there quietly and then come back quietly. Anyway, with his qinggong, no one in the Lu mansion would discover him. Lu Wushuang was a daughter of the pugilistic world, and he would leave after delivering the medicine, so she probably wouldn't mind. With a decision in his heart, he didn't alarm anyone and used the cover of the night to go to Lu Wushuang's room. Not long after, Song Qingshu arrived at his destination. He didn't alarm the servant girls outside and went straight to Lu Wushuang's room. "Miss Lu, this one is Song Qingshu. I have something important to discuss with you." Song Qingshu did not enter abruptly. Instead, he knocked on the door lightly and sent his voice into the room using his inner force. After waiting for a while, there was no response from the room. Song Qingshu frowned. Could it be that she's already asleep? It was already late and Lu Wushuang was injured, so it wasn't strange for her to sleep earlier. Miss Chung. Song Qingshu called Chung Ying instead. In his view, Chung Ying and Lu Wushuang had a good relationship, so she would definitely be by her side to take care of her. Lu Wushuang was injured, so she was in a deeper sleep. Chung Ying was usually alert and should be easily awakened. Who knew that after a while, there would still be no response? Song Qingshu curiously asked, "Could it be because of what happened yesterday that she doesn't dare to see me?" After what happened last night, it was normal that she didn't want to see him. Song Qingshu smiled. He was worried that the other would misunderstand, so he told her the reason for his visit. He thought that since this was related to Lu Wushuang's marriage, she should come and see him. But there was still no response. Song Qingshu's expression finally became serious. He closed his eyes and used his qi to check the situation in the room. He found that there was only one person's breathing inside. It should be Lu Wushuang without a doubt. Qing isn't here. Song Qingshu didn't expect this outcome. Whatever, it's the same to Lu Wushuang. Song Qingshu used his internal force to lift the bolt on the inside of the door and walked in. Other than the smell of herbs, there was also a faint fragrance of a woman. Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that until the end of time, a woman's body would still be fragrant. Miss Lu. Closing the door behind him, Song Qingshu yelled as he walked into the room. Even when he was about to reach the bed, there was no response. Song Qingshu was speechless. This woman slept like a pig. She probably wouldn't even know that he slept with her. Miss Lu, sitting on the side of the bed, Song Qingshu stretched out his hand to shake her shoulder. He thought that she should wake up now. Although he knew that this world was very strict, he didn't think that there was anything wrong with his actions. It was normal for friends in the future to do this. Since there were no outsiders here, he couldn't be bothered to follow the rules. Who knew that not only did Lu Wushuang not wake up, she turned around and hugged his hand. She kept muttering, Sha Dan. Don't leave me." Song Qingshu stretched out his other hand to feel her forehead. He found that it was frighteningly hot. He couldn't help but frown. "How come you have a fever and no one cares? Where's Chung Ying?" He released his qi and discovered that in the entire courtyard, other than Lu Wushuang, there was only the breathing of a maid. There was no trace of Chung Ying. But according to what he saw yesterday, Chung Ying should be living next door. Where did she go? It turned out that because of what happened last night, Chung Ying was in a daze the whole day. She didn't know how to face Song Qingshu and her cousin in the future. In addition, her brother-in-law Lu Guining was back, making her even more uncomfortable. Chung Ying became more and more annoyed. In the end, she said goodbye to Lu Wushuang and left to relax. Lu Wushuang tried to persuade her to stay, but it wasn't convenient for Chung Ying to tell the truth. She could only lie and say that she was summoned by her master. This way, Lu Wushuang couldn't say anything and could only reluctantly say goodbye to her. Because of her leg injury, Lu Wushuang's body was at its weakest. When she heard the news of Yanghua during the day, she was upset and sad. Chung Ying had left, and she kept all the sadness in her heart. Because of her longing for him, it became an illness that exploded in the middle of the night. She felt terrible and didn't want the servant girls to laugh at her, so she sent them far away. In addition, Chung Ying wasn't by her side, so no one noticed her illness in the middle of the night. Song Qingshu naturally didn't know the reason and didn't have time to think about it. He quickly raised his voice and tried to wake her up. "Miss Lu, wake up! Wake up!" Lu Wushuang finally opened her sleepy eyes. Unfortunately, her eyes were hazy and she wasn't awake at all. When she saw Song Qing-shu, she wasn't surprised at all. Instead, she happily jumped into his arms. A fragrant wind blew into his nose. Hugging the hot body in his arms, Song Qing-shu's head was filled with question marks. "Shadan, you finally came to see me. Do you know how much I missed you?" Lu Wushuang's face was pressed against his chest as she muttered to herself. Song Qing-shu finally understood and bitterly smiled as he pushed her away. "Miss Lu, you got the wrong person." At the same time, he transferred some qi into her body. Lu Wushuang's eyes finally regained a moment of clarity. When she saw who she was hugging, she shrunk back onto the bed as if she was scalded by boiling water. She grabbed the blanket and wrapped it tightly around her body. Her pretty face was red, but it wasn't clear if it was because of embarrassment or the fever. Why are you here?" "I came to give you medicine." Song Qing-shu took out the black jade ointment and waved it in front of her, explaining his intentions. Thank you, young master." She originally wanted to reach out to take it, but she immediately realized that her arms were bare. She immediately shrunk back in panic. "Please, put it on the table." Although Lu Wushuang's appearance isn't devastatingly beautiful, I didn't think that the body under the clothes would be so white and tender. He didn't have time to take a closer look before, but now that he saw it, Song Qing-shu discovered that she was only wearing her underwear. Her arms and thighs were mostly exposed. As if sensing his gaze, Lu Wushuang blushed and turned her head away. Her body subconsciously shrunk back into the bed. Song Qing-shu smiled slightly and put the black jade ointment on the table. He then changed the topic. "Why are you here alone? Where's your cousin?" Lu Wushuang then told him about Cheng Ying's departure. Song Qing-shu had a strange expression on his face. "She ran away?" Lu Wushuang, who was curled up in the blanket, didn't know why he had such a reaction. Did something happen between him and her cousin? As soon as the thought came to her mind, a wave of dizziness hit her forehead, and she no longer had the mood to think about it. Feeling her body shaking, Song Qing-shu said in a low voice, "You have a fever now, and your body is very hot. You have to reduce the fever as soon as possible. If the germs invade your injured leg and cause complications, not to mention your leg, you may even lose your life." Although Lu Wushuang didn't really understand the germs and complications, it didn't stop her from realizing the seriousness of the matter. She also began to panic. Then what should I do? Let's find a doctor first. If it was an internal or external injury, Song Qing-shu could still use his internal energy to heal her, but this cold was something he couldn't do anything about. After speaking, he stood up and walked out. Prince Song, wait a moment." Lu Wushuang was slightly weak, but she anxiously shouted. Song Qing-shu was startled and turned around. "What's wrong?" "I don't dare to trouble young master. I'll let the maidservants go," Lu Wushuang said. Song Qing-shu shook his head. "My lightness skills are good, so I'll go faster." Lu Wushuang bit her lips. "Young master, do you really not know? Or are you pretending not to know?" Song Qing-shu was instantly displeased. "What do you mean?" He thought to himself, "I was kind enough to find a doctor for you, but you don't appreciate it. If you go to find a doctor, then wouldn't everyone know that you came to my place at night?" Lu Wushuang said bitterly. "So what? We're in a good place. There's nothing to hide." Song Qing-shu frowned. "You're a great hero, so naturally you don't care about these things. But in my environment, there are many rumors. If there really is something going on between us, then it's fine. Those gossipy women in the residence are afraid of your reputation and won't dare to say anything. But if you leave, they'll think that you abandoned me. At that time, they'll say all sorts of nasty things." Lu Wushuang had lived in this residence for so many years. How could she not know the dirty things in a rich and powerful family? Lu Wushuang forced herself up and pulled the bell by the bedside. Then she said to Song Qing-shu, "I'll call the maidservants over and let them find a doctor." "Young master," seeing her hesitant expression, Song Qing-shu smiled. "Okay, I know what you want to say. Leave immediately." Hearing footsteps coming from outside, Song Qing-shu quickly hid behind screen. Soon, a maidservant ran in. Seeing Lu Wushuang's situation, she anxiously shouted. Lu Wushuang finally calmed her down and arranged for her to find doctor. The young maidservant readily agreed and hurriedly ran out. After confirming that the young maidservant had left, Song Qingshu came out from behind screen. He frowned. This maidservant is so noisy. Is she reliable? Lu Wushuang smiled bitterly. Whether she is reliable or not depends on her. Young master, can I trouble you to pour me a cup of water? Seeing her dry lips, Song Qingshu slapped his head. Look at my memory. A patient with a fever should drink more water. He quickly poured a cup of water and handed it to her. Don't call me young master. It sounds so distant. In the future, if you don't mind, you can call me Brother Song. Lu Wushuang held the cup of water and thought of Sha Dan having a fiancé. She thought of Cheng Ying leaving her, and the person by her side when she was at her weakest was Song Qingshu, whom she had never been able to deal with. All kinds of thoughts rushed in her mind, and she couldn't help but choke up. Thank you, brother. Brother Song. Song Qingshu smiled. It said that people are at their weakest when they are sick. It seems that this is true. Before, you wanted to bite me to death. Lu Wushuang's face turned red. She said with some embarrassment, after you healed my leg, I didn't hate you anymore. Song Qingshu smiled. But before, you didn't call me Brother Song with such sincerity. Lu Wushuang was emotional. Just as she was about to say something, her vision went black and she fell to the side. Song Qingshu hurried over to support her. How are you? Lu Wushuang lay in his arms. After a dozen breaths, she recovered. I feel dizzy when I move a little. Song Qingshu hurriedly touched her forehead and said with a grave expression, I'm afraid your temperature is close to 40 degrees Celsius, and you're already showing signs of convulsions. You have to lower your temperature immediately, or your life will be in danger. Meng's computer would blow from time to time, but it would return to normal after a few restarts, so I didn't care about it. But today, the computer would only turn back to normal once out of a dozen times, and it would suddenly turn blue again. I finally couldn't take it anymore. I made up my mind to download an original Microsoft system and reinstall it from Dell's official website. Chapter 1242. Coming from a technologically advanced world, although Song Qingshu wasn't a doctor, he still had some medical knowledge. When a person's body temperature exceeded 40 degrees, it was very easy for them to faint and have cramps. Once they fainted and had cramps, even if they were cured, there would be irreversible brain damage and sequelae. Lu Wushuang could also feel that her body was in danger. She held her forehead and weakly asked, How do we lower the temperature? The doctor isn't here yet. Even if the doctor is here, he probably won't be able to do anything. Song Qingshu said directly. It had to be known that in the future, there was a lot of debate on whether Chinese medicine was useful or not. But no matter if it was Chinese medicine haters or Chinese medicine fans, they all agreed on the same thing, which was that Chinese medicine took a long time to take effect. They had to wait until the doctor came to write a prescription, then spend time to boil the medicine. Song Qingshu thought about it and said, The only thing we can do now is to lower your body temperature physically. Lower my body temperature physically? Lu Wushuang was confused. What do you mean by lower my body temperature physically? Song Qingshu said, the best way to lower your body temperature physically is to soak in a bucket of warm water and let the water absorb your body temperature. Before he finished, Lu Wushuang curiously asked, since you want to lower the temperature, why not use cold water, but warm water? Isn't cold water more effective? Song Qingshu shook his head and explained, the difference in temperature between cold water and the skin is too large. It will stimulate the skin and cause the pores and blood vessels to contract. The hot air will be sealed in the body and not be able to escape. Not only will it not lower the temperature, but it will also worsen the condition. So that's how it is. Lu Wushuang suddenly understood. She remembered that she had heard Yang Wu mention before that when cultivating the Jade Women's Heart Sutra, the body would produce a large amount of heat. It had to be released in time, but it just couldn't be cultivated on the ancient tomb's cold jade bed. It should be the same logic. Unfortunately, Song Qingshu's gaze fell on her legs. Now that your legs are injured, you can't use a bath to lower your body temperature. Lu Wushuang's face turned slightly red, but she didn't answer. Song Qingshu continued. Now we can only let the maidservants help you wipe your body with a towel, especially your neck, armpits, and groin. This way, the effect of cooling down is very good. Quickly ring the bell and let the maidservants come over. But Lu Wushuang lowered her head and said in a small voice, "There are no more maids." Question mark. Song Qingshu was confused. He had no idea what was going on. I just sent the servant girl to find a doctor. Lu Wushuang could only explain. Song Qingshu was puzzled. The Lu residence is such a rich and powerful family. You're the seventh young mistress. Why would they only assign a maid to you? I was the one who asked for it. I've been wandering in Jianghu since I was a child, and I'm not used to being served by others. Plus my temper isn't very good, so I chased all the other maids away, leaving only one. Lu Wushuang replied with a red face. After all, a girl with a bad temper was not something to be proud of. Who knew that Song Qingshu didn't look down on her at all? Instead, he smiled and said, "Actually, I don't like being served." He came from the future, so he wasn't like the nobles in this world who ordered servants around. She didn't know if it was because she was sick, but Lu Wushuang felt that Song Qingshu was more and more pleasing to the eye. She didn't hate him at all, but the dizziness came again. Her body swayed, and she said to Song Qingshu, "Brother Song, please help me see if the little girl has come back." Song Qingshu nodded and walked to the door to look outside. It was late at night, and there was no sign of the maid. No, it's really hard for a little girl to find a doctor in the middle of the night. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. Lu Wushuang's face was filled with disappointment. She muttered to herself, Then what should I do?" She felt like she couldn't hold on any longer. Song Qingshu said in a deep voice, "I'll help you wipe it." Lu Wushuang was already a little dizzy, and when she heard this, she felt even more dizzy. She looked at him in disbelief. Seeing that he didn't seem to be joking, she couldn't help but blush and say, "How can I do that?" Song Qingshu said with a serious face, "Your body temperature has already reached a frightening level. You need to immediately lower your body temperature." But there are differences between men and women. According to Lu Wushuang's usual temper, she would have already scolded him. But she noticed that his eyes were clear and didn't have any evil thoughts. Plus, she had a better impression of him now, so Lu Wushuang didn't doubt his intentions. "I know what you're worried about. I'll close my eyes later and cover them with a cloth. Don't worry." Song Qingshu really didn't have any thoughts of taking advantage of her. Right now, he was only thinking about how to save her. After all, he had treated her leg, which caused her body's resistance to weaken. He also told her about Yanghua, which hurt her deeply. Even Cheng Ying running away was because of him. If something happened to Lu Wushuang in the end, he would probably feel guilty for the rest of his life. Seeing that she was still hesitating, Song Qingshu had to say, "Or I'll go and call the other people of the Lu mansion right now." "Don't!" Lu Wushuang hurriedly stopped him. It turned out that she had always been stubborn. This time, she was forced to kneel down and apologize by Madame Dowager in public. Although the man in front of her was the culprit, she didn't hate Song Qingshu at all. Instead, she held a grudge against Madame Dowager's previous behavior. After all, this wasn't her home, and she wasn't her biological grandmother. Maybe it was because she was sick and no one was by her side. Even Cheng Ying had left. Lu Wushuang felt a sense of loneliness in her heart. Finally, she made up her mind that when her leg was healed, she would leave the Lu mansion to travel in Jianghu and pay her respects to her parents. At this time, she naturally didn't want a Lu mansion too much. "Take your time to think about it. I'll go and prepare the water for you first." Song Qingshu left these words and hurriedly went out. Looking at his back as he left, Lu Wushuang was stunned. She thought that he was a famous hero. Did he know how to make a fire and boil water? She didn't feel it when she was accompanied just now. Now that she was the only one left in the empty room and her body was burning badly, Lu Wushuang suddenly felt so lonely and small, as if she had been abandoned by the whole world. Thinking of this, She couldn't help hugging her leg and crying. "Why are you crying?" Suddenly, a gentle voice came into her ear. Lu Wushuang raised her head in surprise and saw Song Qing standing by the bed with a basin of water. "Brother Song." Lu Wushuang rubbed her eyes in embarrassment. "Why are you back so soon? I was worried that you would be scared here alone." Song Qing smiled slightly, picked up the towel, and wrung it in the basin of water. Perhaps it was easier to be moved when one was weak. With just a simple sentence, Lu Wushuang felt tears coming out her eyes again. She quickly changed the topic and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to use warm water? I thought it wouldn't be so fast if you went to make a fire and boil water." Looking at the basin, there was no heat at all. It was obviously a basin of cold water. Lu Wushuang's eyes became even more confused. After Song Qing wrung the towel, he pressed it in his palm and then placed it on her forehead. He smiled and said, "Now do you want to see if it's hot or cold?" "Huh." She felt that the towel on her forehead was warm and didn't have the slightest bit of cold. She finally understood. "So you used your internal energy." Song Qing began to wring another towel and casually replied, "Right now your temperature is extremely high. How would I have the time to make a fire and boil water? Besides, it's convenient this way. But this will waste a lot of your internal energy." Although Lu Wushuang's martial arts weren't high, she still understood how difficult it was to heat up cold water in an instant. Song Qing gave a slight smile. "It's just internal energy. I can train it back. If something happens to you, there won't be a Lu Wushuang in this world anymore." Lu Wushuang felt as if her heart was being touched by an invisible hand. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond and could only stare blankly at him. "Why do you keep looking at me like that? Do you think I'm handsome?" Song Qing continued to use his internal energy to heat up the towel. Although he didn't turn his head, he could clearly see her movements. Lu Wushuang cried out in surprise and quickly turned her head. Her heart was beating fast. "Your heart is beating faster. That's good. This will make your blood flow faster and dissipate faster." Song Qing took the towel from her head and put a new one on her forehead. Lu Wushuang bit her lips and said in a small voice, "Big brother Song, is this how you usually flirt with girls?" "Why do you ask?" Song Qing looked at her with a smile. "Could it be that you've been flirted with by me?" Lu Wushuang spat, and her face instantly turned red. How could she say anything? Song Qing coughed. "Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Even if you call the other people in the Lu mansion, it's too late. Let me help you cool down." As he spoke, he casually picked up a ribbon from the bedside and tied it over his eyes. As he covered his eyes with the ribbon, he also closed his eyes. After all, with his current cultivation, his eyesight was already as sharp as lightning. A mere layer of ribbon could not block him at all. Of course, he didn't need to tell Lu Wushuang about this, so that she wouldn't be even more embarrassed. In any case, he wouldn't take advantage of her. It was fine as long as he had a clear conscience. Seeing the ribbon over his eyes, Lu Wushuang's face turned red. She thought that this was the belt he took off and put on the side. Of course, she couldn't say it out loud at this time. She could only say, "You're blindfolded. If you can't see, how are you going to help me? Help me cool down." She originally wanted to say wipe her body, but as soon as she said the word, her heart started beating wildly. She instantly changed her words. This was a problem she had been struggling with. He couldn't see with his eyes blindfolded, but if he wanted to wipe her body, he might search around because he couldn't see. Even if he couldn't see her body, he would still feel it all over. Song Qing smiled slightly. "With my current cultivation, I can imprint your entire body's position in my mind. As long as you don't move around, I won't get the wrong place." Lu Wushuang was extremely embarrassed when he saw through her thoughts. She could only nod and say softly, "Then you can start." The ghost system was really the scapegoat. Monk finally understood that the main culprit was the problem with Dell's graphics card. As soon as the graphics driver was installed, the screen would turn blue. Many owners of the computer had the same problem online. Even the computer repair forums were discussing this problem. In the end, there was no solution. It seemed that only one person said that he solved the problem by soldering the graphics card's video memory again. Others said that it might be the fault of the video memory. Dell's official website replied that one had to download the driver from the official website. They said that one had to install the chipset driver first, then the integrated graphics driver, and then the standalone graphics driver after rebooting. Monk tried to fix it at Dell's official repair station for a long time, but they still couldn't figure out the problem. As the graphics card was soldered to the motherboard, there was no way to change it. They could only suggest changing the motherboard. Chapter 1243. Song Qing-shu nodded his head. He picked up the towel and dipped it in the water before wiping Lu Wushuang's body. Lu Wushuang was extremely nervous, afraid that he would touch her body. But she quickly relaxed. He didn't lie to her. His hands were very steady, accurately wiping her neck with the towel. His fingers didn't even touch her skin. Did I use too much strength? Do you want me to be gentler? Song Qing-shu asked tentatively. Gentler, gentler, Lu Wushuang said in a slightly panicked voice. Okay, then I'll be gentler. Song Qing-shu suddenly realized that his words were a bit ambiguous and couldn't help but laugh. Lu Wushuang felt that his movements were very gentle, as if he was caressing a lover. She didn't know why she had this kind of thought. She clearly didn't have a lover and had never been caressed like this before, but this kind of thought came to her mind. She was already a bit embarrassed, but when she saw the smile on his face, she felt even more embarrassed. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard him say, "Take off the blanket." "Ah!" Lu Wushuang cried out in surprise. She turned her head in shock and found that he had already wiped her neck. Next, he needed to wipe the rest of her body. Although she knew that he couldn't see anything because his eyes were covered, Lu Wushuang was still extremely shy. This was because she was only wearing her underwear under the blanket and most of her body was exposed. Seeing that she didn't move, Song Qing-shu smiled and said, "Are you shy?" No way, Lu Wushuang had a stubborn personality. She unconsciously snorted and took off the blanket, revealing her white and tender body to the air. Perhaps it was because of the fever, but her skin was a bit redder than usual. It looked white and rosy, making her even more attractive. Unfortunately, in the entire room, the only person who could appreciate this beautiful scene had his eyes covered with a thick cloth. After taking off the blanket, Lu Wushuang felt a chill and couldn't help but shiver. Goosebumps appeared all over her body. Song Qing-shu stretched his arms and pulled the quilt over to cover her body. He said softly, "There's no need to completely uncover it. Just expose it bit by bit. Just expose your arm here first." Lu Wushuang scolded herself inwardly. She was really muddle-headed from the fever. She suddenly flipped the blanket off. What was she doing? In order to dispel the awkwardness in her heart, she cleared her throat and said, "Ahem, it's really strange. My body is so hot, but I'm actually afraid of the cold." "There's nothing strange about it." Song Qing-shu took a towel and carefully wiped it from her shoulders to her palms. He explained with a smile, "Only when the temperature difference between a person's body temperature and the temperature of the outside world is within a certain range will they feel that the temperature is suitable. The higher the temperature of the outside world, the smaller the temperature difference will be, and people will feel hot. Correspondingly, when your body temperature increases, the temperature difference will be greater, and you will naturally feel colder. This is also why some people who freeze to death will be found naked when they are found. This is because the difference between their body temperature and the temperature of the outside world is too low. After dropping to a certain level, they will lose the ability to think. They will only subconsciously feel hot, and then instinctively take off all their clothes. Lu Wushuang's red lips opened slightly, and she stared blankly at the man in front of her. She had originally just asked casually, but she didn't expect him to answer in such detail. "Brother Song, you're really amazing. You even know this." Song Qing-shu said with some embarrassment, "I'm just standing on the shoulders of giants. It's not my own ability." Lu Wushuang couldn't help but let out a burst of laughter. She had never been so happy since she got sick. "Brother Song, I always thought that you were an arrogant person. I didn't expect that the more I get to know you, the more humble you are. I've always been an elegant and gentle gentleman." Song Qing-shu's face didn't turn red, and his heart didn't jump. He answered seriously. Lu Wushuang couldn't help but lightly spit. I just praised you, and now you're showing your true colors. Song Qing smiled slightly. Okay, I'm going to wipe your armpits. Bear with it and don't move. Okay. Lu Wushuang's voice instantly became softer. Song Qing held her hand and felt that it was soft and tender, full of the delicacy and elasticity of a young girl. He couldn't help but feel his heart flutter. Fortunately, his mind was very strong now, and he quickly got rid of the distracting thoughts and calmed his mind. He lifted her arm and then gently wiped her armpits. Lu Wushuang's hands were held by him, and the masculine and hard touch made her blush. Who knew that a strange itch would come from her armpits? And she couldn't help but laugh. Ah, I can't. It's so itchy. Song Qing was speechless. Hey, don't move. If you move, your position will change. If I accidentally touch the wrong place, don't blame me. Thinking of the possible consequences, Lu Wushuang's beautiful face changed slightly, and she didn't dare to move again. She could only bite her lips and bear with it. Fortunately, Song Qing quickly finished wiping. Lu Wushuang just heaved a sigh of relief, and then she heard Song Qing say, the other hand. I still need to wipe? Lu Wushuang suddenly made a bitter face. Why don't I do it myself? Song Qing lightly laughed. I just checked your pulse, and it's very weak. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to raise your hand now. Lu Wushuang hurriedly tried, and a deep sense of powerlessness hit her. Perhaps it was because she used too much strength, but she only felt dizzy again. Don't move. The only thing you need to do now is to lie down and rest. Leave the rest to me. Song Qing wrung the towel in the water again, and then began to use his inner force to heat it up to a temperature that was not so cold. Can you not wipe there? It's really itchy, Lu Wushuang begged. Song Qing shook his head and resolutely refused. The neck, armpit, and groin are the places where the lymph is most concentrated, and also the most effective places to reduce fever and temperature. What is lymph, and where is the groin? Lu Wushuang was confused and wanted to ask, but she felt even more dizzy. She hurriedly gathered her thoughts and didn't say anything. Song Qing finished heating the towel, and then stood up and bent down to wipe her armpit on the other side. Because of the inconvenient position, Song Qing bent down, as if his entire upper body was on top of Lu Wushuang. This kind of masculine pressure that was unique to men made Lu Wushuang's breathing quicken, but for some reason, she didn't feel any disgust. Looking at the other person's serious expression with his eyes covered, she couldn't help but feel a little dazed. There was no resistance in her heart, and even her armpit didn't itch as much. After wiping Lu Wushuang's neck and armpit a few times, Song Qing lowered his body and said, Miss Lu, I'm going to wipe your body next. Hearing his words, Lu Wushuang couldn't help but feel a little angry. She thought to herself, if you want to wipe, then wipe. Why did you ask me? What can I answer now? Can't I answer? Or should I answer? She could only turn her face to the other side, facing the direction of the bed, and didn't say a word. Fortunately, Song Qing wasn't an unromantic man. He knew that she had already acquiesced, so he didn't say anything else. Instead, he lifted the blanket on her body and carefully wiped her. After all, he was only relying on his impression, and it was inevitable that there would be some errors. In addition, Lu Wushuang had twisted her body a few times because of the itch, and now she was no longer in the same position, causing him to directly touch a softball. Lu Wushuang's body trembled, and he could clearly feel that her whole body was a little stiff. Song Qing also fell into silence, and, after a long time, he whispered, I didn't do it on purpose. I know. Lu Wushuang bit her lip, and then added, You should go a little lower. After all, Song Qing had experienced a lot, so he quickly recovered and began to wipe her other places without changing his expression. However, Lu Wushuang wasn't so easy to calm down. At that moment, she couldn't help but think of the scene when Yanghua helped her fix her ribs. It was full of a sense of déjà vu originally, when she heard that Yanghua had a fiancé. Whenever she thought of Yanghua, she felt stuffy in her chest. Her whole body was extremely uncomfortable, and she wanted to die immediately. But now that she thought of Yanghua, she suddenly didn't feel like the end of the world. Lu Wushuang was stunned, and thought to herself, is it because of this man? After that embarrassing blunder, the room fell into a strange silence. One was full of worries, and the other was quietly wiping. After a long time, Lu Wushuang's pretty face suddenly became redder and redder. She wanted to say something several times, but in the end, she couldn't help but say, "Brother Song, can you not keep wiping there?" Song Qing-shu said seriously, "Didn't I just tell you that the human body's neck, armpit, and groin are the best places to cool down?" Lu Wushuang's almond-shaped eyes widened, and she said in surprise, "So the groin is there?" Song Qing-shu said gloomily, "You don't know?" Lu Wushuang shook her head, and immediately realized that he couldn't see it. She hurriedly added, How could I know?" Song Qing-shu sighed. "I know that for a girl, this situation is a bit embarrassing, but your body temperature is too frightening. This is an emergency, so just treat me as a doctor." In the eyes of a doctor, there is no difference between a man and a woman. Lu Wushuang cursed in her heart. Which doctor would dare to treat a woman like this? But after all, she was a child of the pugilistic world and was more open-minded than most girls. She knew that the other party was trying to save her, so she silently agreed to this situation. "Brother Song, can you promise me one thing?" Lu Wushuang suddenly opened her mouth. "What thing?" At this time, Song Qingshu's heart was beating faster. Even though his eyes were covered and he couldn't see anything, the tip of his nose was filled with the girl's faint fragrance, and his fingertips could feel the girl's graceful body from time to time. Luckily, he had already made up his mind. If it was another man here, he was afraid that he would have lost his mind. "What happened tonight? Can you not tell anyone?" Lu Wushuang's voice was filled with a pleading tone. Even though the other party had covered his eyes the entire time, anyone who knew what happened tonight was no different from him seeing it in the hearts of others. "Okay, I promise you. Actually, even if you don't tell me, I won't tell anyone." This kind of request was reasonable, and Song Qing-shu naturally had no reason to refuse. You can't even tell Brother Song's wife. Song Qing-shu was now famous all over the world, and the people of the pugilistic world naturally knew that he was already married, and Lu Wushuang was no exception. "Okay." Song Qing-shu nodded. "Thank you." Lu Wushuang finally let out a sigh of relief. She thought that as long as no one knew what happened today, it didn't seem that hard to accept. Just as she had this thought, the sound of noisy footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. "Doctor, my young miss is here. Can you hurry up?" It turned out that the servant girl that was sent out earlier had finally returned. Lu Wushuang heard this and felt her teeth itch. She thought that this little girl was finally willing to come back after going out for so long. "Xiaohuan, don't worry. Dr. Qiu is a famous genius doctor in Shanin City. He will definitely be able to cure Wushuang." A middle-aged woman's voice rang out, and the colleagues next to her all spoke in similar voices. Chapter 1244. Xiaohuan, that damn girl. How did she attract all these people? Lu Wushuang broke out in a cold sweat and complained in her heart. These aunts and concubines were famous for their gossipy mouths. They had nothing to do in their residences, so they could only gossip. If they saw this scene in the room, who knew what would happen to her reputation in Mountain City? Song Qing-shu stood up. He had clearly heard the noise outside. "I'll leave first." Lu Wushuang nodded. Her gaze landed on the basin next to her. She hurriedly said, "Quickly hide the basin. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain later." The servant girl was sent out. She couldn't fetch water in her current state. It was clear that someone had been here. If those people asked, she wouldn't know how to cover up her lie. Song Qing-shu didn't care so much at this time. He pulled off the blindfold and looked around. He found that the basin wasn't easy to hide. After thinking for a while, he could only put it under the bed. Seeing him pull off the blindfold, Lu Wushuang exclaimed and subconsciously shrunk into the blanket. Song Qing-shu rolled his eyes. "I was worried that I wouldn't be able to see and it would be a waste of time. I didn't want to take the chance to see you." "I know." Lu Wushuang pursed her lips. Seeing that he was about to hide behind the screen, she hurriedly said, "There are many of them. If you hide there, you'll be easily seen. Otherwise, where should I hide?" Song Qing-shu looked around. The layout of the room was simple. The ceiling wasn't high. He couldn't hide on the beam, even if he wanted to. Other than behind the screen, there was only the bottom of the bed. However, he didn't want to go under the bed. It was too unlucky. Hearing the footsteps of those people, who were about to enter the door in the blink of an eye, Lu Wushuang was extremely nervous. She blurted out, "Quick, get on the bed." Song Qing-shu was slightly startled. However, he reacted quickly. With a tap of his foot, he jumped onto the bed. Lu Wushuang didn't say anything and covered him with a blanket. At the same time, she put down the bed curtain. Just as she covered Song Qing-shu, the servant girl came in with a large group of aunts and concubines. "Miss, I found a doctor. When I came back, I happened to run into the people of the mansion. When they learn of your illness, the madams of each branch have come to see you," the maidservant said as soon as she entered the door. It turned out that the reason why she went out for so long was that she didn't know who to look for in the evening. Finally, she went to ask the housekeeper of the mansion. The housekeeper pointed her to Dr. Chiu and informed his master. After Lu Zai found out about it, because it was the middle of the night, it was not convenient for him to visit his daughter's boudoir, so he instructed his wife to visit. However, old Madame Tang had treated her so badly before, so he was too embarrassed to come and meet her face to face. So he asked his daughter-in-law, Lu Yu's wife, to visit. In this deep courtyard, news spread very quickly. The other branches were unwilling to fall behind in terms of etiquette and came to visit one after another. Whether it was true love or an effort to save face, everyone was well aware. It was Lu Yu's wife who understood the big picture and knew that a sick person should not be disturbed. If everyone went to visit once in a while, those who weren't sick would be tormented to the point of falling sick. So she decided to wait for everyone to arrive before going over together. That was why she was delayed for so long. Otherwise, she would have come long ago. Seeing so many people come in, Lu Wushuang's eyes rolled and almost fainted. She thought that this Xiao Huan really couldn't do anything but spoil things. After today, she would chase her out tomorrow. When the group of womenfolk came in, they all cried out in alarm. Each and every one of them ran over to the bedside and asked about her well-being, afraid that they couldn't express their concern. Lu Wushuang's heart was in her throat. Although she used the blanket to cover Song Qing-shu and put down the bed curtains, if these people were to sit on the bed, how could they not notice him? Just when she didn't know what to do, fortunately Lu Yu's wife cleared her throat and stopped the group of people. Okay, Wushuang is sick now and can't stand your torment. Let Dr. Chiu take her pulse first. The group of womenfolk resentfully found a place to sit in the room. With so many people in such a small room, if Song Qing-shu was hiding behind the screen, he would definitely be discovered. Your heart is beating very fast. Are you nervous? Lu Wushuang had just breathed a sigh of relief when she suddenly heard Song Qing-shu's voice. She almost cried out in fright. She thought that at this time, everyone was here. If you make a sound, you will kill me. But the strange thing was that the other people in the room didn't seem to notice at all. Everyone's attention was on Dr. Chiu. Lu Wushuang was puzzled when she heard his voice again. Don't worry. I am using telepathy. They can't hear you. With Song Qing-shu's warm breath on her neck, it was a little itchy and a little numb at the same time. Lu Wushuang felt a strange feeling in her heart. Miss, please stretch out your hand. This old man will check your pulse. Dr. Chiu's words interrupted Lu Wushuang's thoughts. She hurriedly stretched out her hand from under the gauze curtain. The maidservant next to her took a silk handkerchief that had already been prepared and covered her wrist. The doctor checked her pulse through the silk handkerchief and didn't touch her skin at all. Lu Wushuang really wanted to pull Song Qing-shu's ear and let him see how other people diagnose and treat her. She didn't dare to be impolite at all, unlike him just now. That nonsense. Not to mention Lu Wushuang's heart was beating wildly at this time. Even Song Qing-shu, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, was shocked for a while. The bed was full of the sweet fragrance of a young girl. The quilt was not very big. In order to avoid exposure, Song Qingshu could only stick closely behind her. Lu Wushuang only wore underwear. A large area of her snow-white skin was unreservedly exposed in front of him. The touching touch of her skin made Song Qingshu's mouth dry. Their bodies were so close to each other. How could Lu Wushuang not feel it? Her whole body softened a bit. At the same time, she felt slightly regretful. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have let him on the bed. Strange, strange. Dr. Chiu stroked his goatee and muttered to himself with a puzzled expression. Everyone in the room was shocked when they heard this. Lu Yu's wife hurriedly asked, "May I ask, Dr. Chiu, what is so strange about it?" Dr. Chiu explained, "Miss Lu's illness must have been a heavy blow recently. Her heart is depressed, causing the evil to enter her body." All the women in the room secretly nodded, thinking that the doctor was indeed a miracle doctor. He actually found the cause of the illness so quickly. Previously, old Madame Tang ordered her to kneel and kowtow to Song Qingshu. It must have been a heavy blow to the proud and arrogant Lu Wushuang. Unfortunately, these people didn't know what the real blow to Lu Wushuang was. Dr. Chiu continued, "Logically speaking, Miss Lu's pulse should be weak and slow with this kind of illness. But now it's beating extremely fast. Strange, strange." Lu Yu's wife's heart sank. She asked in a trembling voice, "Can the miracle doctor cure it?" Dr. Chiu frowned slightly. "I'll write a prescription first. If Miss Lu's high fever subsides after taking the medicine, then it'll be no big deal. If the symptoms still don't improve, then—" Although he didn't finish his sentence, everyone in the room understood what he meant. Lu Wushuang also heard it clearly. Her heart sank. She thought about how she was going to die at such a young age. She hadn't avenged her parents, and she hadn't even met her sweetheart. The more she thought about it, the sadder she felt. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't listen to the comforting words of the aunties outside. "Don't listen to this quack's nonsense. You'll be fine." Just then, Song Qingshu's voice came into her ears again. Lu Wushuang wanted to tell him that Dr. Chiu was a famous miracle doctor in Shanin City. How could he be a quack? Even if he was a quack, he should know more than an outsider like him. Unfortunately, she didn't know how to use telepathy. She couldn't say it out loud, so she could only keep it in her heart. "If I die, then I die. In any case, Brother Yang has a fiancée. I don't want to live anymore." A thought flashed through Lu Wushuang's mind, and she immediately felt relieved. However, even if she died, she wanted to die in a clean manner. If these people saw Song Qingshu hiding in bed with her disheveled clothes, she wouldn't be able to clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. Song Qingshu continued, "In fact, the most important thing for your illness is to reduce the fever. In this era, the effects of traditional Chinese medicine are too slow. The effect of reducing the fever may not be very good, but you don't have to worry. I have a way to save you." Lu Wushuang finally couldn't help it. She reached into the quilt and grabbed his hand. She wrote on his palm with her finger, "What method?" Song Qingshu pondered for a long time before saying, "If I tell you in advance, then this method will be useless." Lu Wushuang was confused. Why would it be useless even if he told her? Why was he being so secretive? As she was wondering, her beautiful face suddenly changed. This was because she felt the other's mouth kiss her neck. His lips were dry and warm, as if they carried a trace of electricity, causing her skin to tremble. "What are you doing?" Lu Wushuang was embarrassed and angry. She quickly wrote on his palm. Song Qingshu did not reply. Instead, he took the opportunity to hold her hand. His lips slowly moved downwards, and an incomparably gentle kiss fell on every inch of skin on her back like raindrops. How could he do this? Lu Wushuang's mind was blank. She didn't expect this kind of result. How could this be? He was a famous hero. How could he do such a thing? Lu Wushuang's mind was in a mess, but the strange feeling coming from behind her forced her to believe it. Although she was a little angry, she had a good impression of him, so she didn't feel any disgust. After all, Lu Wushuang was an inexperienced girl. How could she be a match for a playboy like Song Qingshu? Under the other's clever technique, it didn't take long for her breathing to become heavy. Her skin turned red and her eyes became misty. This was a clear sign that she was aroused. Is he crazy? Lu Wushuang bit her lips and resisted the shyness coming from her body. She didn't dare make a sound. The room was filled with people. If she was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, Dr. Chiu had finished writing the prescription. Lu Yu's wife ordered a maid to go to the residence's pharmacy to brew the medicine. Then, she arranged for Dr. Chiu to rest in the Lu residence's guest room. In case something happened here, he could come at any time. Although Dr. Chiu was unwilling, the Lu clan was the local tyrant of Mountain Yin. Adding on the generous treatment fee, he finally agreed. Chapter 1245. After all, Lu Yu was the candidate to be the next clan head of the Lu clan. He was also the person with the highest position in the entire Lu clan. As his wife, Madame Wang naturally had more authority. The group of women folk didn't dare to disrespect her, so they could only leave behind the gifts they had brought and resentfully leave. After those people left, Madame Wang came to the bed and said softly, "Wu Shuang, don't be afraid. You will get better. Annie will be here to accompany you." Lu Wushuang groaned in a daze, but she was secretly complaining. Although she knew that the other party had good intentions, she couldn't wait for them to leave in the current situation. Just now, when Madame Wang suddenly sat down on the bed, Lu Wushuang's heart was in her throat. She was afraid that Madame Wang would notice something strange under the blankets. Fortunately, her attention was focused on her own illness, so she didn't notice anything strange. Although Madame Wang felt that her answer was a bit coy and her tone was a bit strange, she only thought that it was because she was seriously ill and weak. Who would have thought that there was a man kissing her body under the blankets? Lu Wushuang casually dealt with Madame Wang, but she was extremely nervous. The man behind her didn't seem to be afraid of anything. There was clearly someone sitting by the bed, but not only did he not restrain himself, he became even more aggressive. But the strange thing was that although Lu Wushuang was a bit angry at first, her eyes were now filled with tears. The anger in her heart had been replaced by another kind of unavoidable complex emotion. Waves of heat surged through her body, causing her to unconsciously clamp her legs together. At this time, the servant girl had already brought hot water according to the master's orders. Madame Wang got up to wring a towel. "Wushuang, your body is too hot. Let me help you cool down." When Lu Wushuang heard this, her soul almost left her body. She still had the blankets to hide under, but if Madame Wang really helped her wipe her body, then where would Song Qing-shu hide? No need," Lu Wushuang said in a panic. "Don't be childish. Your body is so hot right now. How can you not use it?" Madame Wang ignored her and directly pressed the towel on her head. Lu Wushuang quickly calmed down because the other party only applied cold water to her forehead and face. At most, he wiped her neck and didn't wipe her body. This way, the other party wouldn't discover the secret under the blankets. "Wushuang, are you feeling particularly uncomfortable right now?" Madame Wang suddenly asked. No, why would Annie ask that?" Lu Wushuang hurriedly replied. At the same time, she thought to herself, how is it uncomfortable? It's obviously very comfortable, but do we really have to continue like this? I see that your body seems to be trembling, and your expression seems to be holding back something. Madame Wang said curiously. Lu Wushuang was instantly embarrassed. It turned out that her body had already been made extremely sensitive by Song Qing-shu. As the other moved downwards, waves of numbness came from behind, making her feel like she was about to fall into a bottomless abyss at any time. I'm just a little cold." In a hurry, Lu Wushuang found an excuse. Madame Wang was not worried about him. A person with a fever will indeed feel cold. "Let me cover you with a blanket." "No," Lu Wushuang screamed. Madame Wang was startled by her exaggerated reaction and looked at her in confusion. Lu Wushuang's face turned red. "I want to drink water. Can Auntie pour me a glass of water?" "Look at my memory. You really should drink more water right now." As expected, Madame Wang was distracted by her. She patted her head and turned around to pour her a glass of water. "Brother Song, Don't be like this." While Madame Wang was turning around, Lu Wushuang turned her head and whispered into the blanket. Unfortunately, Song Qing-shu did not seem to hear her. Instead, he moved one hand from her lower abdomen and the other down her thigh. Lu Wushuang suddenly felt dizzy and did not know what to do. Should she continue to let him do as he pleased? Or should she stop him at the cost of exposing herself? After hesitating for a while, Lu Wushuang still did not have the courage to expose herself. Moreover, deep in her heart, although she knew that this was wrong, she still felt that she could not stop. Madame Wang quickly brought the water over. Lu Wushuang hurriedly turned her head and broke out in a cold sweat. After drinking the water, Lu Wushuang pretended to be asleep and closed her eyes tightly in order to avoid exposing herself by talking to Madame Wang. At the same time, she kept praying that Madame Wang would quickly leave. However, Madame Wang was clearly worried about her condition. She continued to sit by the window and wet her forehead and neck. Lu Wushuang's eyelashes suddenly trembled. It turned out that Song Qing-shu's actions were a step closer. She suddenly felt extremely resentful. This bastard clearly has a wife at home, but he still treats me like this. Every inch of my skin has been played by him. How am I going to marry in the future? At the same time, she was extremely puzzled by her abnormal behavior. Why am I not angry? Normally, even if I am stared at by other men on the street, I will explode. But now that he is treating me like this, I am actually not angry. Could it be that I like him? Why am I willing to be bullied by him like this? No, that's not right. The person I like is Sha Dan. No, I can't let him bully me like this. This is too unfair to Sha Dan. Lu Wushuang's expression changed. Just as she was about to disregard everything and stop him, she suddenly remembered that Yang Guo not only has a loving Miss Long, but also a fiancé. In these 2 years, when did he even think about me? What am I to him? With this thought, the determination that she had just gained instantly faded. She thought about how Dr. Chiu had said that she would not live for long. She had too many regrets in this life. Anyway, there were some things that she had never tried. Since Brother Song didn't hate her, then let him be. She completely let go of the last line of defense in her heart and began to thoroughly experience that different feeling. The only flaw was that Madame Wang was sitting not far away from her. She had to grit her teeth and endure it to avoid being discovered. The kind of stimulation that wandered on the edge of reason and desire soon made her legs clamp together and her body involuntarily contract and tremble. Madame Wang, who was at the side, had an extremely strange expression on her face. Although Lu Wushuang deliberately endured it, it was inevitable that her body would constantly twist and her throat would inevitably emit some sweet sounds. As someone who had experienced it, how could she not know what was going on? Wushuang, this girl, how could she make such shameful sounds? Madame Wang's face was slightly red. She only thought that Lu Wushuang was seriously ill and had lost her mind and had a beautiful dream. However, Madame Wang's gaze finally fell on the quilt. This quilt seemed to be much more bulky than usual. Lu Wushuang was petite, so how could it take up so much space? Connecting this to Lu Wushuang's abnormal reaction, Madame Wang's heart was filled with suspicion. She calmly stood up and then lifted the quilt. When Lu Wushuang reacted, it was already too late to stop her. At that moment, only a blank space was left in her mind. The sudden shock and strong stimulation caused her body to suddenly explode. Her body kept trembling, and a wave of heat seemed to pour out her body. If you want to die, then die. Lu Wushuang's body trembled violently. At this moment, her eyes were tightly closed, as if everything in the outside world had nothing to do with her. Miss Lu, open your eyes. It's okay now. Instead of the angry rebuke or scream that Madame Wang expected, Song Qing-shu's gentle voice came from beside her. Lu Wushuang opened her eyes in confusion and saw Song Qing-shu looking at her with a smile on his face. Madame Wang was lying on the bed without a sound. What happened to her? Lu Wushuang cried out in alarm. The words "murder to silence a witness" appeared in her mind. Madame Wang had always treated her well. If something really happened to her, she would probably never be able to live with her conscience. She just fainted. Don't worry. Song Qing-shu saw the worry in her eyes and immediately explained. It turned out that when Madame Wang lifted the quilt, before she could see anything, he had struck her acupuncture point to make her fall asleep. Her vision went black and she didn't know anything. Knowing that Madame Wang didn't discover anything, Lu Wushuang couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. As soon as she relaxed, she remembered what Song Qing-shu had just done to her. She couldn't help but feel ashamed and angry. Brother Song, why did you do that to me just now? Song Qing-shu was startled. Originally, he thought that he would face a storm of abuse. Who would have thought that the other party would have this kind of expression? Moreover, her tone seemed to be filled with infinite shyness. Miss Lu, Song Qing-shu's eyes were filled with clarity. There was no trace of lust in her voice. You still call me Miss Lu? Lu Wushuang turned her face away. Her tone was full of hidden bitterness. Song Qing-shu smiled awkwardly and could only change his words. Wushuang, your body temperature was too high before. When I was wiping your body, I was interrupted by those people, causing your temperature to be too high. You should have heard what Dr. Chiu said. Your life was actually in danger. Since he didn't have the confidence to save you, I had no choice but to use another method. Another method? Lu Wushuang was confused. She couldn't help but turn her head back in confusion. Song Qing-shu continued to explain. The human body has an instinctive adjustment to temperature. If the body temperature is high, it will sweat to dissipate the heat in the body. However, people with a high fever need to raise the body temperature to enhance the combat power of the immune system because the immune system is fighting with the disease. Therefore, the body's sweat glands will be locked. Therefore, no matter how high the body temperature is, the person with a high fever will not sweat at all. Only when the immune system defeats the disease, the sweat glands will open. At this time, the patient will sweat. Therefore, it is said that after a high fever, as long as you sweat, the disease will basically be cured. Lu Wushuang was even more confused. She murmured, "Why are you telling me this now? You will understand after you listen to me." Song Qing-shu continued to explain, no matter what, there has to be a limit. Although raising the body temperature will help the body's immune system to eliminate the disease, if the body temperature is too high, the disease will not be eliminated in time. It will cause irreparable damage to the human body, even life-threatening. You were in this situation before, so I had to find a way to lower your body temperature. In fact, once the body temperature exceeds the physical temperature, it is just a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. If it was in another world, some drugs, such as acetaminophen, could be used to quickly reduce the fever. Unfortunately, this world doesn't have them. I just felt your body temperature getting higher and higher under the quilt. I knew that your life was hanging by a thread, so I had to use my own method to cool you down. Although many of the terms were unheard of, Lu Wushuang still roughly understood the meaning. She couldn't help but look at him bitterly. So you just molested me like that? Chapter 1246. Song Qing-shu coughed awkwardly and didn't look at her eyes. He explained, I didn't do that to take advantage of you. It was mainly because in that kind of tense environment, I could make your heart beat faster and relax your blood vessels to better take away the heat in your body. At the same time, because the relatives in the Lu residence were all outside, my actions made you break out in cold sweat several times. Once you sweat, your body temperature drops quickly. Also, as he spoke, Song Qing-shu suddenly hesitated and revealed an awkward expression. Lu Wushuang bit her lips and stared at him. Also what? Song Qing-shu took a deep breath, but in the end, he still decided to tell the truth. Also, when a woman is in ecstasy, whether it's her fragrant sweat or her cough, her sweat, they can all carry away a lot of heat. Lu Wushuang glared at him fiercely. You took advantage of me for half a day, but in the end, it was for my own good. Song Qing-shu said in a deep voice, although I'm not a stubborn old pedant, I'm also not a despicable pervert. If you don't believe me, you can check to see if your body temperature has dropped. Lu Wushuang was startled. Only now did she realize that after talking for so long, her head wasn't dizzy at all. She also didn't feel annoyed like before. She touched Wang Shi's forehead and found that her body really wasn't hot anymore. But Lu Wushuang still couldn't accept it. After all, she had been touched by him in the quilt just now, and every inch of her skin had been played with. Although she already believed that he did it to treat her illness, how could she, as a girl, deal with such a thing? Lu Wushuang quietly looked at him. According to what Brother Song said, you didn't have any evil thoughts just now. I don't think so. Song Qing-shu answered with some guilt. It wasn't that he wasn't honest, but if he told the truth, the two of them would likely be entangled in the future. The reason why he did that just now was purely to save her, not to take advantage of her. It was just that he had a loose and unrestrained nature, so he wasn't that polite. Although he knew that the way he saved her was a bit inappropriate, he still did it in the end. Lu Wushuang bit her lips and rolled her eyes at him. Then who was the one that kept pushing me? Song Qing-shu suddenly felt extremely embarrassed. Although he didn't have any evil thoughts, it was inevitable that he would have some normal physiological reactions when he was in a warm and fragrant body in his arms. Young miss, the medicine is ready. When Song Qing-shu didn't know how to answer, a maidservant's voice came from outside the door. He suddenly felt as if he had been granted amnesty and quickly said to Lu Wushuang, "Your fever's gone down. Dr. Chio's medicine should be able to help you recover. Take good care of yourself. I have to go first, otherwise I won't be able to go out when people come." If not for the injury on her leg, Lu Wushuang really wanted to stomp her feet. Even though she had 1,000 words in her heart, she also knew that this was a rare opportunity. If someone found out that Song Qing-shu was in her room, she would be too ashamed to face anyone. But how am I going to explain this to Annie? I have something to tell you. Hearing the maid's footsteps getting closer, Lu Wushuang didn't dare to make him stay. Come and find me tomorrow. I have something to tell you. All right. Hearing the maid's footsteps getting closer, Lu Wushuang didn't dare to make him stay. Come and find me tomorrow. I have something to tell you. Song Qing-shu laughed bitterly, but before he could reply, the servant girl's footsteps had already reached the door. He did not dare to hesitate any longer, and in a flash, he leapt out of the window at the side. Seeing that he was familiar with the place, Lu Wushuang's face became redder. This bastard. When Auntie and the others came, they could have escaped like this, but he chose to crawl into my bed. But she quickly remembered that she was the one who invited the other to her bed. Her face became even redder, and she lightly spat. After taking advantage of me, he ran away. He really is a bastard. Her mind couldn't help but think of the scene in her bed. For a moment, Lu Wushuang couldn't help going silly. After returning to his residence, Song Qing-shu tossed and turned on the bed, unable to sleep. Looking at his bulging pants, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. I really brought this upon myself. Now that it was almost dawn, it was naturally not convenient for him to go find Cheng Yaojia. As for Lu Wushuang, she was a virgin, so he shouldn't harm her. After sleeping for about an hour, he woke up. The peace talks were too important. He and Han Xingzhou were worried that a long night would bring trouble, so they agreed to hurry back to Lin and early in the morning. Early in the morning, the sky had just brightened. When Song Qing-shu arrived at the appointed residence, he found that Han Xingzhou and his group were already waiting there. He couldn't help but say apologetically, "I've troubled Prime Minister Han to wait for a long time." Han Xingzhou smiled and said, "No problem, we also just arrived." Song Qing-shu saw Ling Hu Chong on the side and saw that he was a little listless. He couldn't help but greet him. "Brother Wu, long time no see." Ling Hu Chong was startled and immediately realized that the other party deliberately said this to prevent Han Xingzhou from knowing that he went to seek revenge last night. Although his heart was slightly moved, he still didn't have a good impression of him. He just coldly replied, "Long time no see." Han Xingzhou naturally didn't know about the grievances between them. He smiled and said, "Prince Song, let's go." This time, he left Lin an overnight. In order to be in a hurry, he didn't even take a carriage and directly whipped his horse. Now that he wanted to rush back to Lin, and as soon as possible, he also declined the carriage provided by the Lu Mansion and was also ready to rush back. Song Qing had been on the battlefield many times, so his horsemanship was naturally not a problem. He mounted the horse and said, "Prime Minister Han, please." Han Qingzhou smiled slightly and urged the horse's belly to ride away. Song Qingshu looked back at the Lu mansion. He naturally didn't forget the agreement with Lu Wushuang. But even if they met, what could they say? It was better to just leave. The group rushed to Lin, and in this way, because everyone had prepared 3 good horses to replace them at any time, they basically didn't waste any time on the road and returned to Lin in the evening. After entering Lin Inn, Han Xingzhou settled Song Qingshu in a good inn and said apologetically, "Prince Song, I have to go to the palace to discuss with His Majesty and communicate some details in advance so that you can officially enter the palace to meet His Majesty. I may have to trouble you here for 2 days." Song Qingshu naturally knew that these things couldn't really be discussed in the court. He said, "It doesn't matter. I'm tired from the journey, so I can take a rest. I was supposed to entertain you in the mansion, but after all, gossip is a fearful thing. At this critical moment, if Machi Suo and others use this as a pretext to accuse me of colluding with the enemy and colluding with you, the situation will be very disadvantageous. So I hope you can understand." Han Xingzhou was still apologizing. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Prime Minister Han, you don't have to worry. This time, I came for official business, not to stay in a house. Besides, I'm more at ease in the inn." Han Xingzhou immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That's good. I'll go to the palace first. If you need anything, just let me know. I'll leave a few people here to serve you." Song Qingshu didn't refuse. Although he preferred to be alone, he still needed someone to run errands between him and Han Xingzhou. As for whether these people would monitor him or not with his current cultivation, he could come and go as he pleased. How could those people trouble him? Chapter 12:47. Speaking of which, Song Qingshu also felt that he was a little unkind. Last time he was in Lin, and as Jia Baoyu, he couldn't do anything else. It was all thanks to Li Yuanji that he could leave. However, he was free, but Li Yuanji's sacrifice was a little too big. Originally, she was the imperial concubine and even a strong contender for the empress. Because she was no longer a virgin, she was banished to the cold palace overnight. In fact, even so, with Li Keqiu's 100,000 green camp backing her, she could still live very freely. However, now that Li Keqiu's power was gone, she had no umbrella to protect herself. With such a scandal before, there was no place for her in such a big palace. In his previous life, it was said that there were too many ghosts buried in the Forbidden City. After dark, there were all kinds of ghosts crying at night, and no one dared to wander inside. Although there was a certain element of falsehood, it was very common for imperial concubines to be sentenced to death in the harem, not to mention palace maids and eunuchs. The more Song Qingshu thought about it, the more frightened he became. He couldn't hold back anymore. His figure flashed out of the window and rushed all the way to the palace. He secretly regretted that he should have come to pick her up earlier. If anything happened to her, he was afraid that he would spend the rest of his life in regret. In his mind, Li Yuanji's clever and eccentric innocent smile appeared. Song Qingshu moved faster and faster. He almost crossed the street with one step, and it didn't take long for him to sneak into the palace. He had been to the Southern Song Imperial Palace several times. He easily avoided the patrolling guards and sneaked into the cold palace. He casually grabbed a palace maid and asked where Li Yuanji was. When he learned that she was safe and sound, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then he hit the palace maid's sleeping acupoint and put her in the shadow of the rockery. Song Qingshu didn't choose to kill her. First, he was not a murderer. Second, he himself grew up from an ordinary person to what he was today. He also didn't choose to use the soul transfer method to tamper with her memory. After all, in this palace, everyone had their own philosophy of self-protection. The palace maid would not be stupid enough to report such a thing, because it was completely inviting trouble. Who knew if she would be killed? Song Qingshu finally found Li Yuanji's residence, according to the palace maid's directions. The cold palace had been in disrepair for a long time and was overgrown with weeds. It was obvious that no one had cleaned it for a long time. There was a sense of decay everywhere. The night was cold, and the stars were sparse. He saw a young girl's lonely figure reflected on the window. She was so slender and delicate. Song Qingshu's heart ached when he saw her. He was about to go in to meet her when his heart suddenly stirred. He turned his head and looked outside the courtyard. He heard a series of footsteps. If he was not mistaken, they were rushing over here. Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he decided to observe the situation first. With a tap of his toes, Song Qingshu silently leaped onto the roof. Using the shadow of the roof to hide, he quietly looked in the direction of the footsteps. Soon, a group of people appeared in his sight. In the front was an old nanny in her 50s or 60s, followed by two palace maids. Each palace maid was holding a plate in her hand. One had a piece of white silk, and the other had a copper wine pot with a small wine cup next to it. Behind the two palace maids were several strong eunuchs. These eunuchs' footsteps were light, and their breathing was even. Obviously, they all had martial arts. Song Qingshu was shocked and angry when he saw this. How could he not see what was going on? White silk and poison wine were common methods used to order imperial concubines to death. There were also several eunuchs who knew martial arts. They clearly knew that Li Yuanji knew martial arts and used it to prevent her from resisting. The group of people quickly pushed open the door and entered the room. Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment and decided to wait. He wanted to see who sent this group of people. In any case, with his current cultivation, he could still make it in time to make a move. He wouldn't let Li Yuanji encounter any danger. After removing the roof tiles, the situation in the room could be seen at a glance. Li Yuanji was originally sitting in front of the window in a daze. When she saw a group of people barging in, she couldn't help but frown and say, "Who are you people? Who let you in?" But her expression quickly changed because she saw the things in these people's hands. Growing up in an official's family, how could she not understand what these things represented? This old servant brought two things for Mississippi Miss. Please choose one. The old mama's voice was like a crow's, extremely ear-piercing and unpleasant to hear. In the middle of the night, people couldn't help but feel a chill. Li Yuanji suddenly stood up. "You guys are quite bold. Who sent you here?" The old mama laughed. "Miss, why ask when you already know the answer? In this imperial palace, who else could it be?" Li Yuanji's heart turned cold. She finally realized that she was in danger today. She quickly said, "I want to see the emperor." As she said this, she was about to walk out. Who knew that the eunuchs seemed to have expected this and instantly spread out, blocking her path. The old mama sneered. What kind of status does the emperor have? How could he see a lowly servant in the cold palace who is full of bad luck? Li Yuanji was not afraid of heaven or earth. She had been pampered since she was a child, so she had never suffered this kind of anger before. Her figure flashed, and she was about to slap the other party. The eunuchs behind the old mama instantly moved. After the two sides exchanged several moves, Li Yuanji had no choice but to retreat. Her face alternated between red and white. In the fight, just now, she could see that the martial arts of these eunuchs were above hers. If she had a sword, she might be able to contend with them. But in the inner courtyard of the imperial palace, how could imperial concubines carry weapons? When she first entered the palace, the weapons on her body had already been taken away. "My father is Li Kashio. He has 100,000 troops under him. If he knew of my death, he would not let it go. I don't believe that the emperor would be so unwise. It must be a fake imperial edict." Li Yuanji's teeth were about to shatter as she fiercely stared at the old woman in front of her. "Ha ha!" The old mama let out a voice that was even more unpleasant to hear than an owl's. "Do you still think that you are a noble young miss? I'm not afraid to tell you that your father's forces had already been annihilated by the Golden Snake camp 10 days ago. Even your father became a prisoner of Song Qingshu on the battlefield. I reckon that he has already been beheaded as a sacrifice to the flag. Right now, you're just a stray dog." "What?" Li Yuanji exclaimed. Her body swayed. Fortunately, there was a nearby table supporting her, so she did not fall. "Since you don't want to choose, then this old servant will choose for you." The old mama sneered and gave a signal with her eyes. Several eunuchs took the poisoned wine and walked towards her step by step. Li Yuanji seemed to have lost her soul. She didn't move at all, as if she didn't know the danger that was about to come. Song Qingshu's face was frosty. Just as he was about to make a move, a palace maid's voice suddenly came from outside the courtyard. "Your Highness, you have a noble status. Why did you come to such an unlucky place like the Cold Palace? It's really too inauspicious." "Shut up. I have my own plans." Another voice sounded. Although the tone was unkind, the few words were clear and charming, soft and gentle. Chapter 1248. Song Qingshu was confused. He had clearly heard this voice before, but he just couldn't remember who it was. Fortunately, the other person didn't make him confused for too long. Soon, a few palace maids surrounded a beauty in palace attire and walked leisurely. They appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. She had a delicate face like white jade and a pair of white jade slender hands. Under the moonlight, she looked like a white jade guanyin, beautiful and captivating. Song Qingshu was shocked. It was her. As it turned out, this beautiful woman in palace attire was Ah Ko. When Song Qingshu went on a diplomatic mission to Shanghai Pass and brought Ah Ko back to Yanjing City, because of all kinds of matters, he had been running around everywhere. After that, he had never seen her again. No wonder the voice sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember it. The old maidservants and eunuchs in the room heard the movement and turned around. When they saw the other person's face, they all knelt down and greeted. "Your servant greets Concubine Wu." "Concubine Wu?" Song Qingshu frowned slightly. He thought of what he saw in Yangzhou City. It seemed that Han Xingzhou sent people to rescue her from Yanjing City. Then, in order to form an alliance with the Southern Song to fight against the Qing Kingdom, Wu Sangui conveniently sent her to the Southern Song Palace and made her concubine Wu. Wu Sangui, this old turtle, really has no integrity. Song Qingshu was full of disdain. Back then, in order to form an alliance with Prince Bao, Wu Sangui secretly wanted to betroth Ah Ku to Fu Qinggan. After he ruined it, he sent Ah Ku to the Forbidden City and tried to marry Kangxi. Now he sent Ah Ku to the Southern Song. TSK, TSK, TSK. One woman married 3 times. He really could do it, but this Ah Ku had hard life. By right, no matter if it was Fu Qinggan, Kangxi, or Zhao Go, they were either emperors or princes. Originally, this kind of marriage would not be considered unfair to her. But every marriage did not succeed. Fu Qinggan died, and Kangxi did not dare to accept her for the sake of his reputation. Zhao Go dared to accept her, but unfortunately, he was a eunuch emperor. He could only let her be a nominal imperial concubine. Song Qingshu was well versed in the blissful Diana and was skilled in the Qi observation technique. With one look, he could tell that Ah Ku was still a virgin. To leave such a beauty untouched, unless her husband was not a man, it seemed that Zhao Go was indeed a eunuch emperor. It's probably because of this twisted mentality that he killed people like Yu Fei. Song Qingshu was full of disdain. After Ah Ku came in, he glanced around the room. After seeing the white silk and the poisoned wine, his eyelids couldn't help but twitch as he asked in a deep voice, "Whose idea is this?" The old nanny changed her arrogant and despotic expression in front of Li Yuanji and replied respectfully, "It's the head chief's order." Ah Ku waved his hand. "Got it. You guys can leave first." The old lady immediately became anxious, but humph, Ah Ku snorted tenderly. "You all dare to disobey this official's words?" The old lady hurriedly explained, "This old servant doesn't dare, but the head chief is actually just following orders." She didn't finish, but everyone present knew that in the entire imperial palace, the head chief only listened to one person. Ah Ku's delicate brows furrowed slightly. It was obvious that she was in a difficult position, but she still opened her mouth and said, "I will naturally speak to His Majesty. You guys can leave first." Yes. Since she had already said this, the old nanny naturally didn't dare to say anything else. She called for her companions to pack up and left. "You guys guard the door." Without my orders, don't come in. Aku instructed the palace maids behind her, then walked straight to Li Yuanji. Li Yuanji had already come back to her senses. Looking at the beauty in front of her, even though she was a woman, her heart was moved. She had stayed in the imperial palace for a period of time and had seen Aku a few times before. Even so, seeing her again, she was still stunned by her beauty. Thank you, concubine Wu. Although they weren't friends, the other party had saved her today after all. Li Yuanji wouldn't be so rude. Aku softly responded with an extremely cold attitude. Li Yuanji was startled. Although she did understand why the other party was so cold, she wasn't a person who would flatter others. The room quickly fell into silence. Aku also seemed to be aware of the unusual atmosphere. She cleared her throat and casually exchanged a few words with her. Li Yuanji could hear her lack of interest. In addition, she was in a bad mood after learning about her father's matter. So she directly said, "Concubine Wu, don't beat around the bush. Why did you come here so late at night? Just say it." Concubine Wu was now extremely favored in the imperial palace and constantly received titles and rewards from the emperor. On the other hand, Li Yuanji was now banished to the cold palace and her life was in danger at any time. It could be said that the two of them were in completely different worlds. Li Yuanji didn't believe that the other party would come to me for no reason. On the roof, Song Qingshu also looked puzzled. He didn't understand why Aku would come to Li Yuanji. In the room, Aku hesitated for a long time and finally said, "I heard that you and Song Qingshu are very close." As soon as she said this, not only Li Yuanji, but even Song Qingshu was stunned. He never expected that she would mention him. Should be quite close. Li Yuanji thought of the scene of Song Qingshu lying on top of her that day, and her pretty face unconsciously turned a little red. Noticing her shy expression, Aku suddenly felt a little annoyed. She cleared her throat and said, "Then tell me about things related to him." Li Yuanji was startled. "What's the relationship between concubine Wu and brother Song? I have nothing to do with him." Aku snorted coldly. "Don't worry about anything else. Just tell me about him." "Really?" Li Yuanji stared at her suspiciously. Brother Song has always been romantic and elegant. Did he also have an affair with concubine Wu? Thinking of this, her expression became even more strange. It should be known that there had never been a shortage of beauties in the southern Song imperial palace. But as soon as concubine Wu came, she undoubtedly surpassed all the other beauties and became the first beauty in the harem. How could such a person be seduced by Brother Song? Big Brother Song was simply too powerful. Li Yuanji had always been mischievous, and her brain circuit was not quite the same as that of ordinary women. Her first reaction was not jealousy, but admiration for Song Qingshu's charm. What does concubine want to hear about Brother Song? After all, he saved her life, so Li Yuanji did not refuse to answer the question. Aku pondered for a moment, then said, "I've actually heard quite a bit about him, but they're all hearsay. Who knows, people might spread false rumors. I just want to hear the truth. How about this? Tell me about what happened between the two of you." Li Yuanji exclaimed. It was not a problem for her to talk about Song Qingshu, but how could she tell outsiders about their private affairs? "Can I?" Aku looked at her unhappily. "It's not that I can't." Li Yuanji hesitated for a moment, then said, "Well, it started when Father and I went south and encountered bandits. Then in the Forbidden City, Shengjing, Yangzhou." Of course, Li Yuanji was not stupid enough to tell him everything, so she picked out some things that did not affect the overall situation and told him. Listening to her narrate everything that happened with Song Qingshu, Aku's expression changed. Suddenly, he threw the teacup on the table to the ground, stood up, and said angrily, "Come, slap her." At the end of the month, he asked for monthly votes. He had just been defeated by the 21st place, and now he has fallen out of the top 20. In return, he will update 10,000 words today. In addition, yesterday, he saw a comment from a reader on the official account, saying that it was not that he did not want to read the original version, but that he looked down on the original version and asked for 1 yuan a chapter. He expressed that he would not take the blame for the original version. Nowadays, The original version is only 5 cents per 1,000 words, and the original version is only 3 cents per 1,000 words for VIP 2 and above. Even if you wanted to read 3,000 words a chapter, it would not cost 10 cents. Chapter 1249. Song Qing-shu, who was on the roof, listened to the young girl's affectionate recount of his life. He felt a soft spot in his heart being touched. He thought to himself that although a young married woman's plump and soft body was good, a young girl's heart was even more precious. Just as he was about to burst into tears, he heard Aka fly into a rage. He couldn't help but frown, wondering what had happened to her. Li Yuanji was also dumbfounded. She had told Song Qing-shu's story according to the other party's request, but who would have thought that she would become angry? She was originally a young lady from a noble family, so when had she ever suffered such anger? She coldly snorted, "You told me to tell you. If you don't want to listen, then forget it. This young miss can't afford to serve in Yang Yang's temper. This is my room. Leave by yourself. Bold, lowly servant. How dare you speak to the Yang Yang like this?" The palace maids outside the door heard Aku's call and came in. When they heard Li Yuanji's words, they all angrily shouted. Li Yuanji could barely tolerate Aku. After all, the other party had helped her out of trouble just now. But this group of palace maids were shouting in front of her, which made her angry. "Who do you think you are?" Her figure flashed, and she appeared in front of the palace maids who were cursing the most fiercely and slapped them several times. When Aku heard what Li Yuanji said before, she was already suppressing a belly full of evil fire. Seeing this, she became even angrier. She flew over to stop Li Yuanji, and the two women instantly fought. Although Li Yuanji was not a master, she was still a disciple of Wudong. Lu Feiqing had laid a very solid foundation for her. Aku, on the other hand, had only learned some martial arts from the guards of Ping Shi Wang Mansion. She was not Li Yuanji's opponent, and quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. The group of accompanying palace maids immediately panicked and hurriedly shouted. When the guards outside heard the commotion, they rushed over. When they saw the situation in the room and saw the two Yang Yang fighting, they couldn't help but secretly complain. Needless to say, Aku was now the most favored imperial concubine in the palace. Li Yuanji was not someone to be trifled with. Although she had not been officially conferred the title, the people in the palace had subconsciously regarded her as an imperial concubine. It was just that for some reason, she was suddenly banished to the cold palace. After all, her loss of chastity was related to the reputation of the royal family. The news was deliberately blocked, and not many people knew about it. Although she had been banished to the cold palace, who knew if she would be favored again one day? After all, this kind of thing had happened many times in previous dynasties. At that time, when the other party came to settle the score, the small shrimps, were nothing. "You guys came at the right time. Grab her and slap her hard." The guards were in a dilemma. Akka saw them and immediately ordered. The guards looked at each other and could only helplessly reply, "Yes." Even if Li Yuanji counterattacked, it was a matter for the future. After all, Wu Fei was favored now. If they offended her, the brothers would probably be in trouble immediately. They had no choice but to make a choice. On the roof, Song Qing-shu's face darkened. When Li Yuanji and Aku were fighting, he could have stayed out of it. After all, Aku could not hurt her. But now, these imperial palace guards' martial arts were not weak. Li Yuanji was most likely not a match for them. How could he sit back and watch her suffer such humiliation? "All of you stop." A woman's anxious voice came from afar. Song Qing-shu looked in that direction in confusion. Although the person who had spoken sounded anxious, her voice was soft and carried a bit of Suzhou's Wu-Nong soft language. It was as if she was born without the ability to get angry. He hadn't even seen her in person, but just hearing her voice made one's body go limp. Soon, a woman appeared at the courtyard's entrance. Song Qing-shu looked up and saw that she was about 40 years old. She wore a light yellow Taoist robe. Her features were picturesque, and her beauty was indescribable. In Song Qing-shu's life, he had seen all the beauties in the world, but he had to admit that among all the women he knew, only Zishan Dragon King, Xiao Long Nu, Huang Rong, Goodbye, and a few others could compare to her. The others, like Ajio, were also elegant and refined, but in terms of pure beauty, they could not compare to the woman in front of him. Of course, Song Qing-shu had long since passed the stage of judging a woman's charm by appearance alone. Although the other women's looks were slightly inferior to this person's, they each had their own strengths, and their combined charm might not be inferior. That woman stood at the door, her gaze sweeping across everyone's faces. When everyone made eye contact with her, they felt as if their whole body was immersed in warm water, indescribably comfortable. The room that was incomparably noisy a moment ago was silent. Suddenly, a clang sound was heard as an imperial bodyguard's saber fell to the ground. Then, another clang sound was heard as another person's saber fell to the ground. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but laugh. As expected of the beautiful Chun Yuan, who could cause the downfall of cities and countries, she was truly worthy of being called Chun Yuan. At the same time, he felt strange. Why would Chun Yuan also appear in this palace? TSK. Wu Sangui was really willing to go all out. Not only was a beautiful daughter not enough, but in order to get closer to the Southern Song Alliance, he even walked the path of a madam. Aka saw everyone's reaction, proud and dissatisfied. She coldly snorted and jogged over to help the beautiful woman. "Mother, why are you here?" "Greetings, silent hermit." Hearing Aku's greeting, the group of guards immediately confirmed Chun Yuan's identity. They hurriedly bowed and gulped. Previously, they had heard a rumor that concubine Wu's mother cultivated in the palace without her hair and was even more beautiful than concubine Wu. They didn't quite believe it. After all, Chun Yuan lived in seclusion and rarely showed her face. Most of the guards had seen concubine Wu with their own eyes. Aku's beauty had already stunned them, and they couldn't imagine that there could be a woman more beautiful than her in this world. But now that they had seen her with their own eyes, they realized that they were frogs at the bottom of a well. Chun Yuan had seen many men in the world lose their souls when they saw her, so she didn't mind it. She only slightly nodded in response. However, in the eyes of the guards, she was blushing, and her eyes were sparkling. For a moment, the entire room was filled with charm. Song Qing-shu secretly smacked his lips. He thought to himself, "This Chun Yuan is really born with charm. She obviously didn't deliberately use her charm, but her every movement is so flirtatious, causing men to be captivated by her. If she learned the art of charm, which man in this world can resist her charm?" "What are you doing?" Chun Yuan's cherry lips trembled, causing the group of men to blush again. Reporting to Silent Hermit, this woman was rude to concubine Wu. "We were about to capture her and hand her over to concubine Wu," the group of guards said one after another, as if they were trying to show off in front of Chun Yuan. Among everyone present, apart from Song Qing-shu, Li Yuanji was the first to regain her senses. When she saw their ugly behavior, she couldn't help but snort coldly. A toad lusting after a swan's flesh. The group of guards first blushed when she hit the nail on the head. Then, they flew into a rage out of humiliation and started scolding her. By this time, Chun Yuan had already learned the whole story from her daughter. She looked at Li Yuanji with pity in her eyes. "Miss Li has a hard life. Don't make things difficult for her. Let's go back." Chapter 1250. Although Aku was a little reluctant, she had always respected and loved her mother, so she did not want to go against her wishes. She glared at Li Yuanji and snorted, then held her mother's hand and turned to leave. The group of palace maids followed closely behind. The guards seemed to be enchanted and subconsciously followed behind the mother and daughter. Soon, they disappeared from the courtyard. The noisy room became quiet again. Li Yuanji let out a long sigh of relief. Thinking of the stare that Aka gave her before she left, she only felt inexplicable and did not know how she had offended her. Concubine Wu was so beautiful. Obviously, she was not jealous of her. She was now extremely favored in the harem. Being in the cold palace, she would not be a threat to her. After thinking for a long time, she still could not figure out why. Li Yuanji simply stopped thinking. She walked over and closed the door, then continued to sit alone by the window in a daze. Brother Song finally broke up with Father. According to what the nanny said just now, Father seemed to be the one who lost, but I don't know if he is in danger. Li Yuanji held her chin in her hand and muttered to herself at the table, "It shouldn't be. Brother Song knows that he is my father. Why would he kill him?" But very quickly, worry appeared on her face again. It was clear that she wasn't so sure, but my father caused him so much trouble back then, almost causing him to lose his life. He even wanted to take over Golden Snake Camp. Will he really spare my father? Even if he is willing to let my father go, will his confidants let him go? The more she thought, the more flustered and annoyed she became. Li Yuanji suddenly stood up and kicked the leg of the table. If Brother Song really did something to my father, after thinking for a long time, she still could not think of what she could do. Instead, the hard leg of the table made her eyes filled with tears. Li Yuanji, don't be silly. After he bullied you, there was no news of him. At this time, I don't know which confidant he is lingering in. I'm afraid he has long forgotten that there is a poor little girl waiting for him here. No, Brother Song is not that kind of person. Thinking of the bits and pieces of time she spent with Song Qing-shu, Li Yuanji's spirit shook and she comforted herself. However, she soon became discouraged. Today, someone has already come to give me the white silk poison wine. I don't know how long I can hold on. Perhaps when Brother Song remembers me, I will have already become a wisp of a wronged spirit in this cold palace. When she thought about how her father's fate was unknown and how her family was ruined, Li Yuanji became sadder and sadder as she spoke. In the end, she laid her head on the table and started crying. Sure enough, girls are attracted to their husbands. If your father knew that you were thinking about Brother Song more than anything else, it would be strange if he didn't die from anger. A familiar voice suddenly came into his ears. No way. My father loves me so much. Li Yuanji answered subconsciously. Suddenly, her body trembled and she raised her head. She looked at the man she had been thinking about day and night with an expression of disbelief. Li Yuanji hurriedly rubbed her eyes, as if she was afraid that she was seeing things. Brother Song, am I dreaming? Song Qing-shu's heart was filled with pity. He couldn't help but pull her into his arms. Little sister Yuanji, Brother Song came late. I made you worry for so long. Her whole body was in a warm and wide embrace. When she felt that familiar aura, Li Yuanji finally confirmed that everything was real. She couldn't help but cry. Her 10 slender fingers hugged the other's shoulders. Brother Song Qing-shu gently stroked her soft hair and comforted her in a soft voice. All right. Everything is in the past. In the future, Brother Song will protect you well and won't let you suffer anymore. The two of them hugged each other and talked for a while. Li Yuanji suddenly thought of something. She raised her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes. Brother Song, how long have you been here? A while, Song Qing-shu said with a bit of guilt. How long is a while? Li Yuanji blinked her big eyes as if she had seen through his vagueness. Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly and said, When I came here, I just happened to run into that old woman who brought the white silk poison wine. Li Yuanji immediately said angrily, Then why didn't you come to save me? I was just about to save you, but came. I came here to negotiate with the Southern Song dynasty. It's not good to expose my identity, so I didn't come out, Song Qing-shu explained. Li Yuanji was stunned. For a moment, she didn't know who he was talking about. She's the imperial consort Wu Yu mentioned. Seeing the doubt in her eyes, Song Qing-shu explained. You know her name? Li Yuanji exclaimed. She pestered me to ask about you again. Did you two have an affair? Absolutely not. This time, Song Qing-shu was full of confidence and said righteously. Is that so? Li Yuanji's expression clearly showed that she didn't believe him, but she didn't continue to dwell on this issue. Instead, she asked, Since it's not good for you to expose your identity this time, if Silent Hermit didn't come just now, wouldn't I have been beaten up by Wu Fei for nothing? How is that possible? Song Qingshu hurriedly explained, I had already decided to take action at that time. Who knew that someone would come to your rescue, so coincidentally? From this, it could be seen that little sister Yuanji is a person with great fortune. Great fortune? Li Yuanji smiled bitterly. Does the destruction of my family count as great fortune? In fact, she had always wanted to ask about her father's whereabouts, but she didn't dare to open her mouth for fear of hearing an answer that would break her heart. Although she knew that her father was in the wrong, if Song Qingshu really killed her father, she would never be able to forgive him. What kind of person was Song Qingshu? He could tell what she was worried about just by listening to her tone. He kissed her cheek and said softly, Your father is still alive and well. However, I can't pretend that nothing happened after what he did. Otherwise, I won't be able to face my tens of thousands of subordinates. However, you don't have to worry. It's just house arrest. You can go see him at any time. After a few years, when the situation is settled, I can even restore his freedom. Thank you, Big Brother Song. Growing up in a family of officials, Li Yuanji naturally knew the rules of the game in this world. In a chaotic world, it was always a game of life and death. If it wasn't for her, with Li Kaxio's actions, even if she was killed, no one would feel that it was wrong. Even if the situation was reversed between Song Qingshu and Li Kaxio would definitely not hesitate to kill Song Qingshu. Li Yuanji didn't have the slightest confidence that she could protect her lover's life. She knew that house arrest was the best outcome for her father. Moreover, all of this was a compromise that her lover had made for her. Li Yuanji's heart warmed. She directly hugged her lover's neck and offered her moist and soft red lips. Song Qingshu was already suppressing a bellyful of evil fire because of what happened at Lu Wushuang's place last night. Now that the eyes of the girl in his arms were full of tenderness and sweetness, he only felt a bang in his head. How could he bear it anymore? He picked her up and walked towards the bed. Who knew that at the critical moment, Li Yuanji pressed his hand and said pitifully, It's too unlucky here in the cold palace. I don't want to be here. Song Qingshu's eyes were red, and he asked while panting, Then where do you want to go? Li Yuanji's eyes were like crescent moons, full of a sly smile. I want to go to Wu Fei's bed. Chapter 12:51. Song Qingshu held the girl in his arms and only felt that she was soft and soft. At the same time, bursts of the girl's delicate fragrance assailed his nose, making him feel a little happy for a moment and not want to get up at all. Song Qingshu completely understood why the other party said that she didn't want to stay in the cold palace. After all, the cold palace was a very unlucky place for women. However, he never expected that Li Yuanji would make such an incredible request. What's going on? Song Qingshu's voice was a little dry. Oomph. Li Yuanji raised her chin and snorted. Wu Fei bullied me just now because her man is the emperor and she's a fox exploiting the tiger's might. Now that my man is here, I have to go and get back at her. Song Qingshu couldn't understand her logic after thinking for a long time. Seeing her in high spirits, he suddenly remembered that Li Yuanji was such a strange girl and had always been fearless. It was normal for her to have such an idea. Can I not go? Song Qingshu's nose went straight into her lapel. Now that the arrow was on the string, he didn't want to complicate matters. Li Yuanji pressed down his evil hand, bit her lips, and whispered into his ear, This is also to punish you for not coming to find me for so long, causing me to be alone in this cold palace in fear. I thought you had abandoned me. As she said this, she looked like she was about to cry. Although Song Qingshu knew that she was deliberately acting, he thought that she had the chance to be an imperial concubine, but she had given her chastity to him without hesitation, and then endured such a long time of fear alone. He felt pity for her and gently picked her up. Okay, Brother Song will get back at her for you. Seeing him agree, Li Yuanji was happy at first, but soon she became a little hesitant. Brother Song, didn't you say that you came to negotiate with the Southern Song dynasty this time? Will this affect your business? Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Of course it will affect me. Li Yuanji hurriedly said, Forget it. I was just joking. Song Qing pinched her cheeks. In ancient times, King Yu of the Zhou dynasty used beacons to tease the nobles in order to make a beauty smile. Today, in order to make you happy, I don't mind taking a little risk. Li Yuanji blushed and spat. Bah, you want to be King Yu of Zhou, but I don't want to be Baosi. Although her mouth was full of disgust, her eyes were full of smiles. Women were often like this. Although they knew rationally which was better, they would often be moved by some irrational actions. Let's go. Song Qing tidied up Li Yuanji's clothes, and with a flash, he disappeared into the darkness of the palace. Little sister Yuanji, please show me the way. Don't go. Li Yuanji tugged at his clothes and said guiltily. Song Qing smiled. What's wrong? You've always been fearless, but now you're scared? Who said that? Li Yuanji seemed to be greatly agitated. She stretched out her hand and pointed to the right. Let's go, I'm not afraid. Seeing her pretending to be calm, Song Qing laughed and bent down to kiss her. Then, like a ghost in the palace, he avoided groups of patrolling guards, bypassed countless palace maids and eunuchs, and finally entered concubine Wu's bedroom. Song Qing stood in the bedroom with Li Yuanji in his arms. He smelled a faint, sweet fragrance in the air, which made him feel relaxed and happy. At the same time, there was a hint of seduction in it. Hey, they're not back yet. Li Yuanji whispered. Song Qing smiled. Your husband's lightness skill is unparalleled in the world. Those two women also brought a large group of eunuchs and palace maids with them. It would be strange if they could be faster than us. Who recognized you as my husband? Li Yuanji immediately protested coquettishly, but at the same time, her heart was filled with sweetness. She was obviously very satisfied with this title. Sure, they're back. Song Qing pressed his lips against hers. With a tap of his toes, the two of them jumped onto the beam and hid behind the shadows. Although Li Yuanji was usually willful and mischievous, she knew what was important at critical moments. She hurriedly closed her mouth and even slowed down her breathing for fear of being discovered. After about a dozen breaths, Chen Yuan and Aka walked in from the door. Although Song Qing lightness skill was far faster than theirs, he had spent too much time with Li Yuanji in the cold palace, so the two of them arrived almost at the same time. Even though he had just seen the two of them and was already mentally prepared, Song Qing was still amazed when he saw the beautiful mother and daughter standing together at the same time. Chen Yuan was graceful, and Aka was young. Both of them were beauties that could cause the downfall of cities and countries. In addition, the two women looked very similar, as if they were carved from the same mold. As soon as they entered the room, the color of the whole room seemed to brighten up. Li Yuanji had been an outstanding beauty since she was a child. Even when Yu Tong, whom she admired, didn't like her and preferred Luo Bing, she didn't have the slightest doubt about her appearance. This was because Yu Tong didn't like Luo Bing purely because of her appearance. But now that she saw Aku and her daughter, she felt a deep sense of powerlessness. Whether it was Chen Yuan or Aku, their beauty was dazzling, not to mention the two of them standing together at the same time. As a woman, Li Yuanji was stunned, not to mention a man. She turned her head to look at Song Qing sourly. She thought that he would be dazzled, but his eyes were clear and didn't look the least bit intoxicated. As expected of the man I like. Li Yuanji's originally somewhat depressed mood instantly improved. After Chen Yuan sent Aku in, she said softly, "You should rest early. I'm going back to continue my cultivation." Unexpectedly, Aku hugged her arm and said coquettishly, "No, mother, I want to sleep with you tonight." "How old are you? Why are you still acting like a spoiled child?" Chen Yuan stretched out a slender finger and gently touched her daughter's forehead, but her eyes were full of love. "Please." Ka shook her arm and blinked his eyes, which were filled with hope and pleading. Song Qing who was sitting on the beam of the room, felt his heart skip a beat. He didn't expect Aku to be so coquettish. The voice that made his heart ripple fell into Li Yuanji's ears, and she got goosebumps all over her body. She couldn't help but shiver. Noticing her reaction, Song Qing smiled slightly, thinking that this was the so-called opposites attract and the same repels. Unable to withstand her daughter's pleading, Chen Yuanyuan finally relented. "All right, I'll sleep with you tonight. I have something to say to you." On the beam of the room, Song Qingshu's expression was extremely interesting. One had to know that Aku was now the imperial concubine in name. If Chen Yuanyuan slept with her and the emperor suddenly came at night, wouldn't they be able to kill two birds with one stone and enjoy the blessings of the world? Right now, they were ahead of 21st place by 56 votes and ahead of 22nd place by 74 votes. The most beautiful pair of mother and daughter in the book had already appeared. What were they waiting for? Smash the monk to death with your monthly votes. Speaking of which, Purple Dragon Queen Xiao Zhao, Pucha Ali Tiger Wanyan Zhongjie, and Nanlam Yaorulin were all quite good-looking. Who else hadn't been forgotten by the monk? Right, there was also Li Qingluo, Wang Yuyin, and Duan Jinchuan's other lovers. Chapter 1252. Some beautiful pictures appeared in her mind. Even Song Qingshu, who had a strong self-control, blushed. Song Qingshu quickly mourned for Zhao Go. It was a pity that this eunuch emperor did not have the ability to enjoy this boundless luck with women. Speaking of which, this was probably God's retribution for him. Even Yu Fei was killed. This retribution was too light. Aka ordered the palace maids to prepare hot water for her to wash up. Then, she rushed to Chen Yuanyuan's back and said, "Mother, let me remove your makeup. You're already an imperial concubine, yet you're still so rash." Chen Yuanyuan rolled her eyes at her and said, "Have you forgotten that I'm cultivating with my hair? I don't even wear jewelry, let alone makeup. Why would I need to remove makeup?" "Oh," Aka stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. "It's better for mother to remove your makeup." Chen Yuanyuan smiled slightly. She pressed her daughter's shoulder and made her sit in front of the dressing table. Then, she began to remove the ornaments from her head. "I don't want to be an imperial concubine anymore." Looking at herself in the bronze mirror, Aku suddenly said with a pout. Chen Yuanyuan's beautiful face changed slightly. She hurriedly glanced at the palace maids not far away. Seeing that they were not paying attention to this side, she whispered, "Silly child, you can't say such things." Aku threw the comb on the table and said with a pout, "I have to wear so many things on my head every day when I go out. It's so annoying." Seeing that she was throwing a tantrum because of this, Chen Yuanyuan couldn't help but laugh. While combing her daughter's hair, she said, "You're really a child. You don't know how many women want to wear your clothes, but can't." Aka suddenly sighed. "Mother, you were also a concubine before, but were you really happy being a concubine?" Chen Yuanyuan was startled. For a moment, countless images appeared in her mind. Everything she had experienced in the past few decades flashed through her mind. She couldn't help but sigh faintly. She thought, when have I ever been really happy? Seeing her mother's sad expression in the bronze mirror, Akko hurriedly got up and comforted her. "It's my fault for bringing up mother's sad past. It's nothing. It only means that your cultivation is not good enough. Mother has been practicing Buddhism for so many years. I thought I could be calm, but I didn't expect that I still can't face it calmly." Although Chen Yuanyuan's tone was sad, her voice was still gentle and moving. Song Qingshu saw that when she smiled, she looked lovely when she was distressed. He could not help but feel pity for her. He thought that it was a pity that he was born a few decades too late. Otherwise, he would definitely protect her and not let her go. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. As for his life of hardships, suffering so much. Immediately T broke into laughter in spite of himself. He wondered how he ended up the same as Wu Sangui and Li Zicheng. Learning from the mistakes of the past, he must not be careless. Aka seemed to be thinking of something sad at this time. The mother and daughter stood there in a daze at the same time. Li Yuanji, who was on the beam of the room, leaned over to Song Qingshu's ear and whispered, "Brother Song, why don't we go?" Song Qingshu held her slender waist with one hand and said, "Since we're here, wouldn't it be a pity to leave now? But now there are people below. We can go to Wu Fei's bed, even if we want to." Li Yuanji said gloomily. In fact, she just mentioned it casually. She didn't really think about what would happen on the other side's bed. She was just a little dissatisfied with the other side's arrogant look and wanted to take a little revenge on her. Don't worry, I have a way, but we have to wait for these maids to leave. Song Qingshu comforted her. In fact, even if he appeared now, he could control this room of maids, but the more people there were, the more troublesome it would be to deal with the aftermath. At this time, a group of maids came in one after another, carrying a basin of hot water. Song Qingshu glanced at them from a distance. With his current knowledge, he could only recognize a few of them. He couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. The Southern Song dynasty was worthy of being the Zhengshua dynasty of the Han people. In terms of etiquette, it was much more exquisite than that of the Manchurian Qing dynasty and the Jin kingdom. However, he was not so interested in these red tape in his heart. After being surprised, he sneered at them. They were all the blood and sweat of the common people. Perhaps it was because he was an ordinary person in his previous life. Even if he had become a superior person in this world, he still looked at things from the perspective of ordinary people. After Chun Yuan and Ah Ku washed their faces, there were already maids holding white jade rulers to rub, wipe, and roll their faces. Their movements were extremely gentle. Song Qingshu had excellent eyesight. At a glance, he could see that the white jade rulers in the hands of the maids were made of precious special white jade, which was very expensive. Although he didn't know the inside story, he could roughly guess their purpose of doing this. People in this world believe that jade contained the most abundant qi. It contained the pure qi of yin and yang, which had a magical effect on the health of the human body. This was probably done for beauty and nourishment. Next, another maid brought freshly peeled boiled eggs and gently rubbed them on their faces so that their skin could fully absorb the essence of the eggs. Soon, a third group of maids came up with a plate filled with high-quality pearl powder. They gently smeared it on the faces of the two. Even Li Yuanji was dumbfounded. Even Li Yuanji was flabbergasted by the book. Song Qingshu was afraid that the women in his previous life didn't take care of their bodies so carefully. Looking at the two's habitual appearance, it was no surprise that they had been taken care of like this since they were young. No wonder they were so beautiful. Their skin was whiter than milk and more tender than tofu. However, in this chaotic world, if they didn't have a strong man to protect them, the better they took care of their bodies, the more they would become the playthings of the strong. After the facial care, another maid knelt at the feet of the two, took off their shoes and socks, and then put them into a wooden basin full of rose petals. Song Qingshu couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Not only did the mother and daughter look alike, even the length and size of their feet were exactly the same. It was as if they had been carved from the same piece of jade by a top artist. No, there probably wasn't such a capable artist in this world. Only the uncanny workmanship of the heavens could achieve such a miraculous effect. Looking at the mother and daughter's feet that were whiter than milk, Li Yuanji couldn't help but feel regret. Why did she come here? She was asking for trouble. Turning around, she found that Song Qingshu was staring at her. She angrily stretched out her hand in front of his face and said, "You're not allowed to look." Song Qingshu wasn't the kind of peeping idiot. He didn't get angry when his eyes were covered. Instead, he pitifully held Li Yuanji in his arms and whispered in her ear, "Yuanji Mimi doesn't allow me to look, so I won't look." Only then did Li Yuanji's anger turn into joy. The corners of her mouth rose slightly, and she proudly snorted, "That's more like it." The corners of the young girl's mouth curled up slightly, and her pair of beautiful eyes were like the bright night sky, exuding a mysterious light. Song Qingshu secretly thought, although Yuanji Mimi is not as beautiful as Chun Yuan and Ah Ku, the mother and daughter pair, but her quirky and youthful temperament has a unique charm, not to mention that she is deeply in love with me. That girl's heart is as clear as glass, which is more precious than anything else. Why are you looking at me like that? Li Yuanji's white face gradually turned red, and she shyly lowered her head. Because you look good. Song Qingshu paused and whispered softly in her ear, "You look so good that I can't wait now." He had finally completed today's 10,000-word update. As for whether the monthly votes list would be broken by the two brothers behind him, this monk didn't think about it anymore. Good night, gentlemen. I wish you have a good dream every day and be a groom every night. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.